Brewtallyspeaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. For over 30 years, Rockabilia has been the go-to destination for all things band merch. With over 500,000 items in their online store and collaborations with today's hottest bands, you're sure to find something you love. Use our code BREW10 at checkout and take 10% off your total order. So go pick up your favorite new piece of merch now over at Rockabilia.com. And now, on to the show.
People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give up.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Brewtallyspeaking podcast. I am your host, John. This episode's guest is the returning Jarrod Montague of Taproot. It was really great getting to talk to Jarrod. We talked for a while on this episode. I'm sure you're looking at the runtime and just going, holy hell, that is, wow, they got into it. And we cover so much. But something else I want to cover real quick, just because it has been a week. Your boy has been working, both literally at my job and then just banging out podcasts. There's sort of in the beginning of the year, I was kind of talking about how I felt like I didn't know if I was going to get back onto the swing of things because it just seemed like it was taking a while for the industry to kind of get going again. And it has been busy for me. Speaking of to next week's episode, the next week's guest, Mike from Darkest Hour, I did that on my lunch break because that was the only time I had to do it. I'm doing another chat tomorrow, 2 of them tomorrow. I did one yesterday. I went and saw Fox and the See You Next Tuesday guys and Drew. Did a chat with them during sound check, basically, of the venue, and just trying to keep striking while the iron is hot and really just having fun, different conversations with people from all over the spectrum of, rock, metal, and so forth. And gotta say, there's one happening this week. You will see the photo when it's done, but there is one that's happening this week where it feels like it should be like a monumental episode number, like an anniversary or something, but sadly, it's just going to be quote unquote another episode, even though it's not going to be, not to me. But all will be revealed with that soon enough. But it's been really fun. Just been really busy trying to stay engaged and happy and doing things that matter to me. And that's I can tell that I have really been fortunate to do a lot of stuff and hang out with a lot of people this last collective week. Spent yesterday, and also want to real quickly, not that they're necessarily going to hear it, but really want to give a shout out to Carly and all of the Long Drink staff here locally in Grand Rapids. They threw an event yesterday at the Speakeasy Lounge here in Grand Rapids with Miles Teller, who is the co-owner, I believe, of Long Drink. Long Drink is something I stumbled across thanks to a friend at another bar who had me try it to see if it was worth bringing in. I immediately said this is really great, a great alternative to White Claw and High Noons and things like that. And it has been crazy to see how much our area has really just gravitated to Long Drink. I was telling the reps yesterday, I think at least at the bar that I used to work at here in town and other bars they go to, I probably see Long Drink maybe 2 or 3 to 1 being drank over some of these other things. So to be able to go to the event and kind of have a little bit preferential treatment was really nice. So just want to give a quick shout out to, like I said, Carly and the Long Drink representatives here in town for the hospitality to Rush and myself for the evening. It was really cool to just kind of experience it. I'm sure I'll talk more about that down the road, but it was just another random fun thing to go do and not necessarily anything I would have envisioned that I would go do. But there is definitely a few stories to be told, and they will be told down the road, probably on the bar podcast, if I'm being honest. But let's get into my conversation with Jarrod. It's a long one. Let's get things going, and I'll talk to you all on the other side of it. Oh, man. I I feel like so much. I feel like so much has happened since the last time we talked. Um, it's kind of crazy. I mean, at the time, I think obviously you were putting out your book, and the B sides besides thing was kind of the only Taproot-ish thing really new and being worked on, and now here we are. What, 3, 4 years later, at least 5 maybe.
Yeah, you got to add a couple for COVID. There's like a time warp there.
I'm so bad. I'm so bad about that. I tell people that all the time about how because of COVID, it just like collectively we lost 2 years. And when you're trying to remember a time, you're like, no, that was only 4 years, like 3 years ago. And you're like, no, I lost 2. So it's not often you kind of get to collectively have like a hive, like a thing happen to literally everybody where it affects everyone the same, and not just like, oh well, I got injured in this accident and I forgot that like my concept of time like went away for a little bit. Everyone collectively went through it. But
it's true. I had to remember when my book came out, and it was 2017. So we're going on 6-7 years. So yeah, you add the 2 COVID years to your 4 or 5, and there we are.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like kind of a jumping off point, just because like, you and I have kind of stayed in touch throughout the whole process, but correct me if I'm wrong, when you had set up the thing with Steven, you had kind of made it seem like he's kind of working on some music. It'll probably be a solo thing. So it kind of even seemed like the fact that this ended up becoming a Taproot release sort of was, I don't want to say a surprise to you, but sort of wasn't in the cards even, a handful of years ago.
That is completely correct. I think the last time we talked, he probably had about 4 demo songs that I had heard. And his intent the whole time was to release those as kind of a solo project, which he was calling Scissors, and a couple different reasons for that, but it essentially comes from his initials, which are SSR. So he extends that out to Scissors. That's his Instagram handle, and I think maybe even on Facebook. And they were really good songs, and I really liked them, and I had listened to them a few times. And I guess where that story went was it took him a long time. He essentially was using the studio that we had recorded our Long Road Home in with Taproot, which was the last record I did, in Saline, Michigan, just outside of Ann Arbor. And then I know that the guys also recorded Plead the Fifth and the episodes there. So we had become pretty good friends with Andy Paddlin, who owns it. And he was kind of in between working, going there. I think he had his 5 a.m. sessions on Instagram where he would go in for a couple hours on Fridays, and it extended out for many years as he was continuing to write songs. And I kind of kept in touch with him, as well had Phil, our bass player, in terms of, well, is there any way we can help with the songs, or what do you plan to do with those? Do you plan to do any shows? We'd be happy to help. And when it was all said and done, and he was getting ready to release them, as he would put it, to his handful of Instagram followers, just kind of didn't really have a great release plan. We, particularly Phil, had convinced him that you don't necessarily want to release new music under a new moniker, being that Scissors or whatever. It sounds like Taproot, so why don't you just release it as a Taproot record? Me and Phil will take a back seat. Steven completely wrote and recorded all those songs himself. So we agreed that we wouldn't take any kind of monetary writing credits or anything like that. You can have the Taproot money. Of course, if you need to go do a partnership or anything to release it, or put any kind of promo or anything like that behind it, you can go do that yourself. But you should release it as a Taproot record. So essentially Phil and I kind of gave him our blessing, and that's what he ended up doing. So, and it came out last year.
Yeah, right. I think about a week after my birthday. I think that came out on the 26th, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, cool. That sounds about right.
September.
Yep.
So one of those things where it was just wild, because it's like, I remember, favorite song and stuff like that came out, and it was just kind of weird, because it's like it there's something kind of to be said about living in the day and age we live in now, where it's like all these bands from like, my youth, and I'll even say kind of like the performers, the artists themselves, kind of getting, I don't necessarily want to say a second bite at this thing, but kind of, I think, just having an understanding of how to do the band thing now in 2020, 2022, 2023, 24, whatever, and how to make it work for them. I mean, maybe this is a band outside of your realm of knowledge, but I went this past January to go see Botch play their reunion shows in Seattle, and that was a band that by the time they really had kind of started, and I got into them, they were breaking up, kind of like Refused and stuff like that. There's just certain bands that like broke up right as they're kind of breaking, didn't really tour a whole lot, and it became this thing where at this point now I've seen so many bands that I thought I'd never get to because they're coming back and they're going, okay, we understand we have a built-in audience and it may not be what it ever was, or maybe it's more or whatever. We'll figure that out. But we also were at a point where we can kind of dictate the pace of what we want to do. It's not a label going, okay, you're hitting the road for the next 18 to 24 months. You're going to be home for 2 to 3, write a new record. We're looking to put that out in Q4 and rinse, wash, repeat until you're broke, you hate each other, or in debt, or we drop you, whichever comes first.
Yep, and that cycle demonstrates that you understand how being in a band and the music business works, because you're right. But certainly we found that for a number of reasons, I think a number of things had to come together to make it work. But obviously we all have our personal lives, which are somewhat comprised of families and jobs in some cases. And so one of the reasons that I left the band, which has probably been pretty well documented, especially in our conversations, was because I had a young family and plus the money was kind of falling out. And so I felt like I needed to go get a more steady stream of income at the time when I left the band. And, the other thing, not only that, it was, I wanted to make sure that I was home to raise my kids. And, quite frankly, the time commitment, like you had said, wasn't going to work for me when we were gone essentially 9 months out of the year to either write or record records or be on the road. So the timing for me worked out well when we talked about doing shows again for a number of reasons. Number one, we decided that we could probably play on the weekends, which was more flexible for all of us. The other thing that's nice about weekends is that's when most people are going to shows, your Fridays and Saturdays. So even Sundays, a lot of people don't want to come to shows. A lot of people that go to shows have to get up early for work on Monday. So those are kind of your best markets. And when you're on tour, a lot of times it's a challenge just to kind of fill in those Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday dates. You're probably going to have less people show up, which means the guarantees are going to be less. So the fact that we could load these shows on the weekends, which meant better guarantees and more people would show up, was nice and more flexible for us and for the fans. And also, again, just being able to really dictate how we're going to be able to do it. We didn't have to necessarily, in fact, I don't think it's a secret. I think we've talked about it a few times that we all ended up using our personal vehicles. We looked at maybe renting a band bus. At one point, we did rent a Mercedes Sprinter van to go out. What's that?
I was going to say the bandwagon, but no, I know what you're talking about, the Sprinter van.
Yeah, I think that is what we use. So we rented one of those to go out to do the New York City show, and we also played in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. So that made sense. But other than that, between us and our crew, we're coming from kind of 4 different places, from Wisconsin, Southern Ohio, and then kind of Chicago area, and then Southeast Michigan. So we kind of kept all the shows to the Midwest and then slightly out east. And then we all just ended up driving our personal vehicles, vans and Trailblazers and pickup trucks or whatever. And it really worked for us. The business case was there. We could have rented an RV. We could have rented a bus or, bought something like that. But the math just didn't make sense on it. And especially we would have all had to come from somewhere centrally to meet up anyway. So it was really a blessing to be able to figure all that out and do it that way. And it's also led to us being able to consider doing even more shows this year coming up. So it's really exciting.
This might be an interesting thing to kind of break down a little bit, because I know in our previous chat, obviously band really wasn't anything anymore, wasn't going to really be anything, at least not really with you involved outside of maybe one-off shows, Christmas shows or something here and there, but like that was going to be the extent of it. What is kind of coming back to it? What is it revealed to you now that you get, like I said, a second chance at it as a grown adult versus kind of a wide-eyed kid getting into it for the first time?
Oh, that's such a great question. You're always asking great questions.
Thank you.
Because I hadn't really thought about it very much. So it's made me realize that the things I enjoyed and still enjoy the most about being in a band and making music are playing the show, obviously, and connecting with people. So my favorite parts of the evenings and doing all these shows is playing, and then being able to meet and chat with people before and after the show. And then it also made me realize that as I'm a much older adult now, I don't have as much patience for what I see as the time that's wasted between the driving. And then, of course, usually you get to the venue, you have your sound check, and then there's a few hours in the middle of the day where you're kind of killing time. So as you become older, you tend to find that your time is very valuable. So I find myself sitting there at a venue between 4 p.m. and 7, 8 p.m. thinking, oh my gosh, I could be doing something much more productive at home or spending time with my kids or my wife. And this is a big waste of time to be sitting here. So I don't know what that means, but it definitely makes me appreciate the fact that I get to, again, I'm not taking it for granted, and I'm feel really excited that we get to reconnect with our fans and with the music. But on the other hand, it makes me realize how much more time there would be in that scenario if you were on tour and on the road. And I think that's probably why a lot of people get burnt out. I was talking to another band. I could probably say their name. I don't think they'd mind me sharing this, but the band No Resolve, I was talking to them, and they are still doing the kind of full on tour thing. And they connected with me after they'd been on a 2 or 3 month tour. And they said, how did you do that for all those years? This is really hard. It takes a toll on your body and, and your sleep schedules and the inconsistencies. The other thing that I realized too, as I'm putting this all together is, humans evolved to be kind of in one location, right? We were supposed to be hunter-gatherers and set up our community and be around the same people. And we weren't supposed to really know more than probably 200 or 300 people in our lifetime. So I think that when you're on the road like that, and I've been reflecting about this a lot too, just on my touring days, I think that takes a pretty strong toll on your brain and your body to be in all those different environments every other day. You're taking in information from lots of different places, from meeting lots of different people. And I realize that now more that you're tired, not only from the physical aspect of playing, but I think also just your brain taking in all that new information all the time from being in different environments. And I also now have a hypothesis that maybe that's why a lot of bands kind of succumb into the drugs and the alcohol thing, because my hypothesis is that your brain's kind of so overwhelmed with all that information that maybe that's like a numbing agent to deal with some of all of that's going on. So I think that touring is probably harder on people than maybe everyone really recognizes or realizes.
Well, I mean, there's a few things in there. Like, first of all, the touring for 3 months thing. I don't know if you're familiar with Doc Coyle in name, the guitar player for Bad Wolves, used to be in this band, God forbid. But he's got a podcast, and over this last, God, I really want to say it was about 8 or 9 months, he was touring with this band Ice Nine Kills, and a friend of mine, Patrick, is the drummer. You might have actually seen them opening for Metallica. We'll get to that later.
I did.
And Ice Nine is one of those bands that they are and have been since I first met them, mainly, and Patrick mainly, but they've just been, probably 9-10 months out of the year, they're on the road. And it was interesting to hear Doc, when he finally was done with his stint filling in for the band, being like, I'm just worn down. I haven't toured that much, that hard in a very, very long time. And it's everything you want as a touring musician, because obviously staying busy means you're making money and you're in demand and all these things, but at what cost down the road? Either mental, physical health, whatever, your relationships, what ones you may have at that point that are left. And it's kind of this weird duality where we and this is something I've kind of taken from sort of Doc and Patrick, seeing them being so motivated to not just do any one thing. I joke that those two are probably the most like allergic to a time off, like can't deal with time off, got to be doing something. But it's what motivates me to kind of do the same thing, where it's like, you know, I do this now, I have another podcast, that no one's heard yet, that we're still on the back burner trying to finish up at least the first season, and get that done. I'm married, I have a job, I have things that I got to do. And you know, it's always kind of this trying to find the balance, the work-life balance, the balance of life. And a lot of times, and even conveniently today, I was listening to a podcast, the Impulsive podcast with John Cena, and they were so shocked that he learned how to speak Mandarin, and he, you know, was acting and doing all this stuff, and they were kind of saying that, you know, you seem like a very regimented person. How do you make time for everything? And he goes, I understand that I only have a certain amount of time. Time is the one constant we all have, and it's finite, and you have to understand that if you want this one thing, that potentially you have to make sacrifices somewhere else. Are you willing to make those sacrifices? Are the things in your life able to help you make those sacrifices? And that kind of really stuck with me. It was really kind of a thing where to hear someone that when you look at someone like him, you're like, oh, you've got it all. It's so easy for you. But, you know, he was talking about like, I'm not working out nearly as much because I'm spending between being on a set and then drive time 15, 16, 17-hour days shooting for, you know, TV and movies and stuff. So I can't be at the gym 5, 6, 7 days a week anymore. I can maybe do it 2 days a week on the weekends. But then I also have to make time for these other things. And honestly, at this point, I'm realizing that the thing I need is sleep. My body needs recovery for me to be the optimal person I am. And then it's just kind of maintaining other things until I have the time to reinvest back in those. And man, hearing him talk about that took me like, as I'm nearing 40 this year, I will be 40. And it's like this thing where it's like, I realized so much of my life, especially after working in food and retail, customer service management, and just things in general, that's all I feel like I've ever tried doing. Just how can I appease everybody? How can I do everything I want to do and not sacrifice or burn the rope at both ends and then just end up being burned out in the grand scheme of things? And ultimately what I'm coming to realize is it takes patience, it takes not beating yourself up, and more importantly, it seems like it takes an understanding that you sometimes have weaknesses and you need to find others that will help you. I don't want to say mask those weaknesses, but maybe that's where their strengths are, and you can kind of have them help you achieve these things, and that it really takes a team or a community. So as you were kind of saying that, that's kind of spurned all those kind of thoughts in my head real quickly. And it's one of those I don't know. I don't know how people do it. But it feels nice to hear that we're at a point, I think, now where people are legitimately admitting that they can't do everything that it seems like they are doing so easily, and that it takes a lot of work and sacrifice.
Yeah, those are all really interesting points. And so I turned 48 yesterday. So you're
happy belated.
Thank you. I'd say you're pretty advanced in starting to figure some of those things out. And one of the things in my book that I talked about, True Rock Stars, 12 Guiding Principles for Success and Happiness, which you did a great interview on, which I appreciate. So essentially I had done a bunch of research on a bunch of nonfiction kind of self-help and business books. And I was looking to see what this formula was for success and happiness, as the title dictates. And one of the things that I put in there was a lot of people had said to me, well, how do you do all these different things? And so I put in there kind of a skeleton of what a daily schedule is. And what you figure out is, or what I figured out is that I don't watch as much TV or movies as the average person does after you do all this research. So that kind of 3 or 4 hour block where I've come to understand that a lot of people are just kind of vegging out. And you know what? I don't judge, because maybe they need it. Maybe they've got their own struggles in their life, or in their, you know, maybe they hate their job and that's the only thing that they look forward to. So I don't blame them. Everyone needs their vice. I've got my vices. But you know, that's a spot where I would kind of fill in that extra time to do something with either writing or music or whatever else I was doing, practicing. But the other thing that I realized in doing that is that you have to be flexible with the seasons on when you're at with life, because I'm seeing my oldest son, who's almost 18, he's cut from a similar cloth as me. And I hear him say things like, there's just so many things that I want to learn about or things that I want to do. And I'm figuring out really quickly that I'm going to have to pick a couple or a few. And I was like, welcome to my world. I've had a lot of interest over the years from, medicine to music and a lot of things in between. And the other thing that I've realized that I've had to get better at, which I haven't mastered, is knowing that I'm going to have to say no to some things and some people that I probably don't want to say no to, because I am a people pleaser, as I think you kind of alluded to. So I'm trying to get more comfortable with that, and B, that I have and probably am going to continue to disappoint people in how much I'll say make time to spend with them, because I do prioritize that really heavily. But when you have that finite amount of time that you're talking about, you're just going to have to make some decisions on how you spend that time. And unfortunately, even though I prioritize my friendships pretty strongly, I've come to the conclusion that, okay, even some of my best friends, we see each other 2, 3, 4 times a year. Yeah, I got together with, I think, 4 or 5 of my best high school friends over Christmas, and we hadn't all gotten together in 6 months to a year, if that. So those are all some of the things that I'm kind of coming to grips with. And you're right, it all has to come together as I guess maybe the compression of time as you get older puts a little bit more of a finer point on that. But yeah, I enjoy also listening to how other people think about that and prioritize that. I definitely want to check out that John Cena interview. That sounds cool.
It was a good one. Speaking to you, talking to your old, like your kid that's about to be 18, that I have to make a decision on something. So I talk about this all the time, and I've never remembered as I'm talking about it to look it up. So while you were talking, I was like, oh, I know I'm going to bring this up, so I'm going to Google it real quick so I can give the person a shout out in case anyone actually wants to listen to this like 12-minute TED Talk. But there is a woman, when Bridget, my wife, and I were on a flight one night, she was watching a couple of TED Talks, and she was like, watch this one, it's you. And I started watching it, and it's like, this woman, Emily Wapnick, she starts talking about how when we grow up, we're asked, what do we want to be in a singular fashion? Like, what do you want to be? And it's always like a singular thing. It's never things that you could be. Oh, I would like to be this. I'd like to do this. I'd like to be this. And that it becomes this thing where it's almost a point of that we are almost looked at in a negative light if you can't figure it out, or that you want to do a few different things. You don't want to just be stuck to a singular thing or be defined by one thing. And so she talked about how there's this thing, and she calls it multi-potentialites, that there's nothing wrong with being passionate about a lot of things, but also maybe not being as passionate about that thing anymore because it gave way to something else that you're now pursuing more full on. And it was really interesting because at first I thought my wife was just like, oh, I don't commit to anything. That's what I took away initially in the first couple of minutes, because I didn't wait for all the information, which doesn't that sound very obvious thing that we all do, where you hear just a little bit of something and then you make the quick decision, oh, this is what this must be about, before taking and retaining all the information and then making a decision moving forward about how you feel about it. And I really, really identify with the thing of like, it's not, you don't have to be one thing. I think in life, even if you've never thought of the idea of being a multi-potentialite, even if the idea of, getting taken back to like elementary school, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm sure we all have that experience. But the thing is if you really think about it as an adult all these years later, you're a son, possibly a parent, you're a coworker, you're a boss, you're a spouse, you're a whatever. We're never any one thing. So why do we box ourselves into this idea that you have to be a one thing? It's so weird. And it's
yeah.
As I get older, it's so interesting to see how we've never been a singular organism of any kind or a singular functioning thing, that we're always been multi-potentialites and wear many hats depending on what we do. And in that, I think it's been interesting to kind of navigate that as I get older, and seeing how young kids now, like, I don't know if we talked about this one on our last chat, but it was really interesting living in Ann Arbor and, running a restaurant full of college kids at one of the most prestigious colleges in the US. And at times I would be like, hey, I need you to do this. And they're like, nope, not doing that. This job doesn't pay me enough to do that. And I was like, well, that's like, and in my head, I'm like, well, that's your fucking job, man. You have to. But I have been on the other side of it now where that was a really big teaching moment for me to where it's like, sometimes a job is just that. It is a job. And to quote Clerks, title does not dictate behavior. You want me to do X, Y, and Z, or you want me to do A, B, and C, but X, Y, and Z is not, like, what am I getting out of it? A job that you're paying me minimal wage to do, but I'm doing a job that should be of X, Y, and Z because of the carrot you dangle in front of me saying that maybe, hopefully, if I keep doing these things, you're going to promote me or give me a raise. And then when you don't, what? Can I just not do that? No, because now that's the expectation that I'm going to do that. And that sucks. And it was a thing for me, like those kids, as much as I hated them and in the time, it was an invaluable lesson for my self-worth moving forward where I was like, they're not entitled necessarily. They understand their value and their self-worth and what they're not willing to and not willing to compromise in themselves. And to me, I thought that was so awesome. And it's something I've really tried applying since I kind of stumbled across that epiphany of just like, oh, you aren't entitled little shits. You're actually kind of smart and you're teaching me something that I should use moving forward. And I have.
Wow, that's great. Okay, so I love the term multi-potentialite, so I definitely want to check that out. It sounds like
I'll send you a link when we're done chatting.
That's great. So it almost sounds like she coined that. So on that point, one thing that I thought of was something that I've forced myself to do recently. It seemed like whenever you get together with people that you don't know or you're meeting them for the first time, I'd say my opening line, especially if it was with another male for whatever reason, it seems like I would say, oh, so what do you do for work? Just as kind of an icebreaker. And then my wife, it seems like her opening line with another woman would be like, oh, do you work outside the home? Right. I mean, there's definitely some stereotypes in both of those things. So, right. But what I've now tried to do is when I meet people, I'll say, so how do you spend your time? And I think that gets a little bit more. I just got a Michigan National Championship shirt for my birthday, so pretty excited about that.
I was down. Emden got a ton of my money this past weekend.
That's awesome. So yeah, I've been asking people, so how do you spend your time? And that definitely elicits some surprise at first, but certainly a much wider and more interesting response. Gives people a lot more kind of leeway on what they want to talk about. And I think we're so used to answering that question of what do you do for work? That's kind of the first thing that comes to mind, especially if you're meeting a stranger for the first time. And it's an easy way to identify yourself or something that you spend a lot of your time doing. But if someone wanted to be a little bit more creative, they could talk about their family life or their faith life or their work life or their interests or hobbies or whatever. So I like that. The other thing when you're talking about the work thing, and I'd be curious to know, you said that you found some ways to apply what you learned from those kids in your life. So I'd like to hear how you've done that. But I don't know if you know who Alex Hormozy is, but he is a social media personality, I'd say. He's a business guy. He's pretty young. He's in his 30s, and he's really, really smart. He's made a bunch of money, but he has really drawn a lot of smart conclusions about human behavior and working and sales and all kinds of stuff. And one of the things that he talks about is the importance of just going to do something to start to gain a skill set. So he said, we spend so much time thinking about, oh, well, I want to start a business. Well, what kind of business should I start? Oh, well, I'm going to go watch a bunch of podcasts and figure out all the different ways there are to make money. And then I'm going to do something. And Mr. Beast even talks about this. He says people ask him how to start a successful podcast. And he says,
do it.
Go make 100 videos and try to improve one thing every time and then come back to me. And Alex Hormozy kind of says the same thing. He's like, if you're in sales, he's like, I'll tell people to go try to sell something and get me 100 no's. As soon as you have 100 people that tell you no, come back to me and talk to me. And they're like, what do you mean? I thought we're supposed to get yeses. He's like, yeah, but you're going to learn a lot when you get all those no's. And I love that. That kind of flips the whole script in terms of taking the pressure off of what we might be doing to fail, which is probably what we're afraid of before venturing into something. I'm sure it wasn't easy to start any of your podcasts or any of the things that you do, but you just got to start doing them and start talking to people. And so, yeah, I really love those lessons. So back to the question. So what are some things maybe that you have found where that's applicable to your life, where you learn something from someone and their value and all that?
Well, I think like a big one for me was, and I say this as someone who, make no bones about it, I choose to look the way that I do. And we can, break that down from a mental perspective down the road. But I mean, the too long didn't read of it is simply, I always grew up being the shortest person. I had a handful of birth defects growing up where, I'm having medical professionals putting me on a chart going, here's normal and here's you. You're not normal. You never will be. And here are all the things you won't do. And I have, as I've gotten older, realized like among a lot of things that caused a lot of it caused imposter syndrome. It made me never feel like I was going to be good enough to do anything, because if these adults who are professionals and know the most things are telling me this, then why would I ever challenge that? So, I mean, as I get older, that's something right there that it's taught me that just because someone says you can't do something doesn't mean you can't. I mean, we have so many examples in our lives of that. I mean, kind of putting it back on you guys, it's like, how often did you hear, you want to be in a touring band and get signed? That'll never happen. You want to go to U of M? Probably never going to happen. Like, there are things that we hear and people just kind of shoot down so quickly that it's like, I think a lot of us, you talk about 100 no's, we hear it from being a child. And we don't even realize the ramifications of what we're saying. And that's something that after going to therapy, and this is kind of, I think, really where it comes into play. A lot of these epiphanies of like how I navigate my life more differently with more purpose and intent into everything. Something that was really hard for me was to God, it sounds so like, it's so hard sometimes, like when doing these and people ask questions to me, I'm just like, I can see the internet comments of going, someone like, shut the fuck up and let the guest talk.
Oh no, I'm glad this is a conversation the way that it is, because I am interested in the things that you're doing and talking about too. So yeah, please continue.
But like, I think one of the things is the power of no. I have really embraced it in multi facets of my life. A big one, I think too often now we live in a world where everyone just wants to be included, and that's always been a thing in life. But I think we've taken it a step further, because as you were saying, we were only kind of, I think, really meant to exist only knowing maybe 100 people, 200 tops. And now we know so many things about so many people that, and the big example, and working in a bar really taught me this as a door person, where I stopped talking a whole lot because I would just blow my voice out. So it's like, I'm just going to be quiet and watch, because essentially that's my job, is to watch the bar. But you would hear people, or I would hear people, especially young college-age kids, who would come in and be like, oh, did you see? Yeah. And if you're watching the group, you can kind of tell the couple of people who definitely had no idea about the topic at hand, but wanted to be a part of it. And it made me kind of think to myself, what's the point? You're not able to engage. No one's engaging with you in this whole thing. So really, you're just kind of wasting that to me, that opportunity to learn and be a part of something. And more how that manifests, I think, is I love the when I say I don't know something, because now I'm giving you an opportunity to teach me. Mm-hmm. And then from there, what is that going to do? Is it, another, this kind of goes in full circles around things, but like my time at Sam's Club running, the front end manager and stuff, I remember, and I used to hate this saying with a passion, but I realize now how true it is. Like most sayings, they always would say, you didn't fail. It wasn't a bad thing. It's an area of opportunity. And I hated that. I hated it. Because like when I'd be like, oh, we failed at this test. Like, no, it was an area of opportunity to learn. What did you learn? So that is the thing I keep coming back to, where it's not a failure. Me saying I don't know something isn't me failing. It's an opportunity for me to learn something else and be a part of the conversation. Or maybe you'll in turn be like, oh, well, never mind. It's not worth it. Which then maybe the area of opportunity there was we didn't waste each other's time on something you didn't feel was valuable either. It's been really interesting to see that side of things, where suddenly if you say, oh, I don't know what that is, some people will just be like, oh, well, never mind then. Which to me, I'm like, cool. Well, maybe that was a 45-minute conversation. I would have been bored to tears listening to you talk. But you know what? By me saying, I don't know, tell me. And you're like, no. boom, we're not there now, and that's awesome.
That
I think there's just such a fear of people not knowing everything, and that's the other part of it that I've come to is I can't possibly know everything, and the expectation that I should or I have to is it's not attainable and it's not sustainable. And so being able to tell people I don't know things and that I'm ready to learn has been invaluable. I think the other big thing for me and how it's applied is understanding and sitting with something, because a big thing, the other part of the reason I went to therapy was I was bad at over guessing and overthinking problems that never came because I wanted to be ready for the what ifs in life. And unfortunately, just like the biggest what if, well, I don't want to have a kid now because I want to be ready for the kid. You can't possibly have all the check marks because it's a human life and it's not constant. It's not going to be in, a nice little box for you. It's messy and that's life. But a big thing that therapy taught me was deal with what's in front of you, make the informed decisions based on the facts you currently have, and move forward. And I think that was another really big one for me was instead of stressing out about something, instead of overthinking, what if Jarrod comes on and he's not in a good mood and okay, I got to ask really good questions and what about the YouTube video comments maybe later? And no, what can I focus on right now? You and I having a conversation, being present for you, being present for me, and wherever it goes, being happy with it because it's a once in a lifetime thing that's going to happen right now. We don't get to redo this. And then applying that kind of to my life as a whole. I came to this really big epiphany one day listening to myself and a friend bitch about our jobs. And I thought to myself, I was like, this sounds like if you take the context of I'm talking about a job, if I were to say this is a significant other or a spouse or a friend, the first thing we'd all say, you need to not be in that relationship. You need to not give that any more of your time. And then I had this epiphany. Jobs can be, careers can be essentially like a form of like financial manipulation, like an abusive relationship. And because some companies and some jobs will know that, and they treat you lesser than, and you just learn to accept it and you just deal with it. And there have been times since in the last, I'll say probably the last like 8 to 10 years, I've treated a job the way they treat me, in the fact that sometimes like when I get a vibe that like, oh, you don't care about me, I will give you my all, but it won't matter. It doesn't change anything. I'm just another number to you. Why is it that I have to give you 2 weeks and I have to do all this stuff for you, but you can fire me immediately with no loose ends and it's just business? So I started looking at jobs I had, and like, a job I had previously had, I stayed there for like 3-4 years. And like my first week, like about 150 years worth of experience left. One dude had been with the company 37 years and was leaving to go start and advance his career somewhere else. And I was like, that seems like a red flag. I had our CFO tell me that our shipping and receiving department doesn't affect the bottom line, so he doesn't care about us. So
Wow.
when I decided to leave, they were like, well, what can we do to make you stay? And I was like, nothing. You don't care about me. And then I was like, I've been here. You keep throwing these numbers. It was a down year. It was this as to why I don't get raises and all these other things. So let me flip it. If I were to tell you year in and year out, I really sorry I didn't perform really well this year, but you know what? Next year, I'm going to do like so good for you guys. No, you wouldn't hear it. You would maybe let me get away with it once, and then you'd be like, dude, you're not upholding your end of the bargain. We got to let you go. I'm treating jobs kind of the same way they would treat me. And if you show me loyalty and respect and all that kind of stuff, I give it back to you. But at the end of the day, something I keep hearing all the successful people say is like, there has to be the balance, and you don't work to live. You don't live to work. You work to live. And to me, like that's been a lot of the bigger things like that I've taken away from just getting older and being like, this is my only life, man. Like I'm not going to give you 60 hours when this person doesn't have to do it because, well, they have kids. Well, I'm sorry. So now I get punished because I don't have kids? That's not fair. Like it's just, and sorry, thanks for coming to my TED Talk about me bitching about old
No,
jobs.
it's awesome. I mean, I'm fascinated. You know, I for my work, I've been with the same company 18 years, and I'm fortunate that I feel like I've landed in a really good spot, and I've been promoted a bunch of times. So I run a big team now, and so I've learned a lot about people and how we need to behave as employees, and everyone's got a boss, right? So as employees and as employers and managers. So I find that whole topic very interesting. And if there's anything, I always say that my why. So obviously, I work for a publicly traded Fortune 200 company. So ultimately, the business exists to make money for shareholders. That's a given. But on the other hand, we can still do things to influence our surroundings and our culture at work, because my opinion is that we spend so much time at work that we might as well try to make the best of it. And hopefully there can be we can find some kind of a higher purpose in it. So my why is that I want to help create a culture where people can feel comfortable coming to work, and they can put in, honest day's work for an honest day's pay. And then they can go home and they can do whatever they want with that money for their, whatever they're, if they're spending that money on themselves or their families or their charities or whatever. But I know that because I've been in the situation where you sit there in the car before you walk in the building, and you're just dreading walking in, and it's just this awful feeling, right? And the last thing that I would want is for anyone on my team to feel that way. So, I'm really big on trying to let people know how we're thinking about the business and what's going on with the business. I'm really big on recognition. I'm always trying to get feedback from our hourly employees to figure out what they're thinking about and how we can better support them. So yeah, I find that all to be really interesting. To your point about I appreciate you sharing what you learned from therapy, because I've always thought it'd be really interesting to go to therapy just to see what it's all about, because I'm sure that we can all learn something from that. But when you were talking about all of the anxiety working up to certain things, there's the old saying of, most of the things that we worry about, whatever percent it is, never come to fruition. And I think one of the things that I found that I figured out, or just kind of started doing, maybe because I figured out that often those things you worry about don't come to fruition. And if you've committed to something, as long as you are willing to even go through the pain to go through it, oftentimes it's going to come out okay. So sometimes when people ask me how I, manage all the things that I manage with, doing a bunch of shows with my multiple bands and with the work and with the family, is I tell people, I just put it in my calendar. So if my calendar is open, we've already got 10 shows booked for this year. It looks like it's open. I just put it on the calendar. And yeah, can I sit there at night and think about like, oh shoot, well, we're probably gonna have to get together 2 weeks to rehearse before that show starts. And I hope I don't forget to order the drum heads, and I've got a broken cymbal they got to replace. There's all the things that have to happen before that. But I've also learned that, okay, if I put in the calendar and then I just do a little bit of proactive thinking, my wife and I sit in bed every night. Is okay, how's the calendar look tomorrow? Who's doing what with what kids? What do you got after school? All those things. And ultimately, if it's in the calendar, you're going to go through it. And,
fortunately, I have to laugh. My wife and I just did that like last week. We got a new calendar for the year. We started putting in shows, like vet appointments, all the different stuff, and days off that we want for other things. And I was just like, okay. But it's like, I guess I don't know why I think it's so funny, or why I wish I didn't need that thing. But it is interesting that when you start seeing it, you're like, okay, this is like, now this is what my week, my month, my handful, like half a year, my year looks like. And it kind of gives you a sort of sense of like a calming thing. And I think I almost think, and I should kind of pay more attention to it, mainly from my wife's perspective, but I feel like, and I wonder if more people, I hate to use the term regimented, but I wonder if more people did that. Even just putting down like, okay, I want to go to these concerts, and then I have so-and-so's birthday, or this thing, just the things you're going to be doing, or you would like to do. Like I have a couple of things where I'm like, oh, Braves are in Chicago, Braves are in Milwaukee, Detroit. I'm going to go catch a game if I can. But, here are the dates. Keep it on my radar. I wonder how much less stress you have, because you have more of an understanding of what your day-to-day, your time is going to look like, versus the thing of not knowing And like a big thing that I'm a big proponent of is being malleable. Like so many people, that know me really well are like, you're just so calm and just go with everything. And I go, well, I have a partner who really likes to overplan things because she is a manager at a pharmaceutical company and has to have deadlines and all these things. And I get it. That's not my life. So I am, and this is another big thing I talk about as a whole too, because it's something I've really been thinking more about, is the roles we play within our relationships. And a big
Absolutely.
one for me is kind of thinking more about like sports. Like, as a manager, like everyone likes me as a manager because I'm going to be right in there with you doing all the things. Like I'm not going to be one of those people you're seeing just like sitting there like on his phone going like, yeah, you need to do all that. I'm just going to go ahead and
Right.
whatever. It's like I'm coming in on days off. I'm coming in early. I'm staying late. I'm working with you. I'm doing all these things. But I feel like that's the kind of manager I would want to be, and I want to be involved. I mean, that's just me, but thinking, especially when it comes to sports, you can't all be Michael Jordan. You can't all be an A type person.
Nope.
Sometimes you need to understand, what does the team need? What does this thing need? I need to be that. And so being malleable, I think, is one of my strongest traits as a person because I can go into different situations, different personality types, kind of figure out where I need to be so I can set everyone up and ourselves up for success in whatever that looks like. And I think that's something else a lot of us don't really take the time to think of, is that I'm a type A personality. That's all I am. That's all I am. That's all I am. And it's like, well, sometimes you can't all be type A personalities in one thing. Someone's got to take a back seat and also not get your feelings hurt about it. Shed the ego.
Yeah, or maybe even to the point, maybe there are times when we need to be listeners and followers, and we can still be leaders in other situations. It's probably kind of an old story that's been passed down, but supposedly there was a young lady that was applying to college, and one of the questions in her essay was, "Are you a leader?" And apparently she was a little insecure and a little bit of an introvert, so she says, "Well, no, I'm actually not a leader, but I'm really good at supporting people, blah, 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 blah." And then when she finally got her acceptance letter back, they said, "Well, we really appreciated your essay and we really liked it because we found out that we're going to have, 3,150 leaders come to the school. We figured they should at least have one follower." So, yeah.
Well, I mean, wow, I can't believe I've never put this together. I mean, look at what social media is. You don't have acquaintances. What are they called? Followers.
That's right.
Never thought of that until just now. Huh. See, that's what you get on this podcast. You break down things to like their core level.
I love it, man. It's awesome. Where do we go from here?
Well, so I mean, like actually a kind of an interesting question I would have. I mean, with you having so many kids, and I think we kind of talked about this previously. I have two. It's always funny. Someone actually pointed this out. They're like, you ask a lot of questions about kids to people who have them, considering you don't, and you're not going to. And I was like, but I find the idea of seeing someone grow into a person, like their own being, really interesting, and also having a sense of guidance to kind of, I mean, inevitably that's what parents are there for, is to kind of help guide someone through and not make all the mistakes you did, even though I think we can all agree most of us are going to make our mistakes anyway, and that's how we learn.
Yep. That's right.
But I don't think I had asked this before, because I think I had asked if any of your kids had really like were interested in what you had done, had come to any of the reunion shows like at the machine shop or anything. But I would almost want to say now, as you are kind of in this new season of life where Taproot's kind of a thing again, more consistently than it ever had been in probably their lives, and you're also working at a very successful company and all that kind of stuff, what are some of the values you're trying to teach to them? And what do you think, just by you doing those things, not even maybe going out of your way to teach them something, but just by doing, what do you think they're maybe picking up?
Two things come to mind: hard work and not lying. So
To them, or yourself, or both?
I'm sorry?
To them, yourself, or both?
Oh, well, So I have always been someone that I learned a long time ago not to lie, and that it would only get you in trouble. So except for maybe the occasional, whatever. Yeah, honey, I'm leaving for work in 5 minutes. I leave in 15 minutes, even though I knew I was going to, whatever, things like that, right? But on the big stuff, I can say that I can't think of any examples of where I've, really lied about something big. So I'm fortunately learned that lesson a long time ago. So, but what I found is that maybe for whatever reason, and quite frankly, actually, my daughters were in foster care when they were 3 and 4 years old. We brought them into foster care, and then we adopted them when they were 5 and 6. So they had a little bit of trauma coming from that environment, which brought them into foster care. And quite frankly, I can't figure out if that's more to do with why they seem to be more dishonest about things, or if it's their gender. Because my 3 boys they'll start the lie, but then if you really challenge them on it, they'll quickly tell the truth. So I don't know. I don't know if it's the fact that they're young women. I don't know if that's sexist or not, but this happens to be with these 2 individual girls. They seem to be dishonest more often than my boys. So what I tell them, I've always been a little bit jealous of people that say, oh, my dad always used to say, or oh, my mom used to say, or my grandpa used to say, because I don't really have too many of those. My parents said a lot of really smart things, but it wasn't something they said all the time. So I have to think about any lessons that they really taught me. So now I've made it a point to say, okay, I've said that I've gone out of my way to do the big show around this like 30 times. I want you all to remember that my dad used to say, don't lie. It's the number one thing that will ruin your life. It will ruin your relationships. It will ruin your job. It'll ruin everything, because as soon as somebody realizes that they can't trust you, you don't have anything left. And I've just seen that happen over and over and over again. So that's one kind of lesson or value that I'm really trying to impart on them, and I actually tell them. The second one, which is the hard work, I'd say that I do that more through demonstrating, because one of the things that I've realized that I've always done, I think it's just kind of something that maybe I learned from my parents because they were both really hard workers, is that I've kind of always got my one main thing going on, and then now it's called side hustles or whatever you want to call it. But I always call it kind of cultivating other opportunities. So I've always just found it interesting, and you kind of do the same thing, where if you have your job, you've always got a few other things cooking. Maybe that's because I think probably way in my subconscious, part of me says like, well, if that ever doesn't work out, at least I can go, play bucket drums in the streets of Vegas and, make a little bit of busking money or whatever. Right. So that's part of it. But also I want my kids to understand that, we've got a nice house and we've got a really comfortable life. I'm very proud of and fortunate to have that. And I want my kids to know that, that came from hard work. And, because when I left Taproot, I was completely broke. So basically all of this stuff I've built from essentially working my tail off and kind of adding value to my company and getting promoted through that. So, but I'll be honest with you, even now, we still go and clean the dental office that my wife used to work at for some extra money, because I bring my kids to do it and I give them a little bit of the money that we make doing that. But I want them to realize that if you want to have nice things, these are the things that you have to do. You have to go above and beyond. Dad's got a good job, which again, I'm really fortunate to have, but even dad, who makes this really good job, will go do this extra stuff on the weekends, and they see me going and play gigs at night with my other band, Westfall. And so I make a little bit of extra money there. And so I want them to know that you've got to be out there and being willing to put in the work to, have the things and have the kind of life that you want to have.
I mean, I was saying, talking about, someone like Patrick or Doc, or even like the person the vocalist of the band shirt you're wearing right now, Alfonso, is someone that I, to a degree, and he'll hear this, and this isn't anything he doesn't know, like all of us have said this to him, but like, I think sometimes that dude like works so much to the detriment of himself that I'm like, man, I think I know you're doing all this because like, all the jobs, your actual job, like the 2 side hustles you do, or the 4 or 5, I think that he does technically, it's like, I know you're doing it because it funds the band and the band is the passion and it, affords you getting to go on a cruise like with your wife and your kid and doing all this stuff. And I get it. But I'm also like, I the other side of it is I'm just like, dude, I want to tell people like that. It's like, you also need to like enjoy it because like this is the only life you got, man. And I know, and this is kind of going to another thing I think about so often, and like the purpose of like why we exist. And something I keep coming back to is, for me, a big unburdening moment for me was, when I realized I wasn't going to have kids and that wasn't a part of my life. It was a very freeing thing because I didn't have to, again, going back to the whole overthinking and overplanning. I knew it wasn't something I wanted, but what if it did? What would that look like? And to me, it became this thing where when I realized that's not, I was like, I don't have to think about this being's life beyond me. I don't have to help set it up for success when I'm gone. I get to live my life. Excuse me. I get to live my life and enjoy the life I have with my wife, doing things we enjoy. I mean, like this weekend, she surprised me with tickets to go see a show that I wanted to go see, but I wasn't really going to go because I'm like, it's not a band or bands that she's into, so I'm just not going to. And then once she was like, and then there's a show the next night, and then I was like, oh, there's a Pistons game like midday on Saturday. She's like, let's go. Splurged and got tickets like right behind the Pistons bench. Really cool. I took in a lot of different things, had a lot of thoughts about, basketball and sports and all that kind of stuff just in my own head about it. And was a thing where I was like, if I had a kid, like, paying someone to watch my child for a whole weekend and or packing up a child or whatever, I was like, I'm very appreciative that is my life. But I think we take the time to really enjoy ourselves. And I think that was sort of the other thing I was talking to about putting things in a calendar is it gives you something to look forward to. And I think that's a huge thing that a lot of us don't take the time to do is to reward ourselves for, really grinding it out for 2 to 3 months. Like something I realized for my wife is she needs something like every quarter, like a trip or something to look forward to make all those late nights and the hassles and the phone calls and all that worth it. And I think that's something that we're not good at. I don't think we're good at giving ourselves little rewards throughout the year and feeling like, it's okay to want that and to deserve those things for yourself.
That's a really great point. And after you started going down that road, I kind of figured out where you're going. And I realized that what I was saying was definitely one side of what I would consider to be a healthy side of life when you're just talking about, don't lie and work really hard. Because I will say that I've been fortunate enough to find my wife, and we've been married 21 years, and she is somebody who balances me out in a really good way. So she's the one that makes sure that, she bought me tickets to go see Bill Burr for Christmas. So we're going to go do that. I think it's in March at LCA, and we're going on vacation on spring break with my son for his senior year. And yeah, so we do take those trips and we try to make those intentional moments. But I probably would not be as intentional about doing that unless I was fortunate enough to find the right person. So I guess I think that fortunately my kids are probably learning that side of what life should be from her. And then they can default on what dad's teaching them over here on this side. And hopefully the right mix is where you really want to be. But that's great. It sounds like you have found the right balance as far as those things are concerned also. Because that is super important. If anything, that's probably something when I think back on even what I wrote in my book about what the success and happiness is, it probably could have had more of an element of you got to make sure that you take that time for yourself too, because not everyone is built the same way, and you can exhaust yourself and you can overrun your mind with, mental health concerns and anxiety. I mean, one of the things that I worry about is, the fact that I don't know if I would love to understand more fully if we are misdiagnosing anxiety for what a healthy amount of stress is, especially when I think about, kind of coaching young people on how to deal with those things, because like we were talking about the worrying and what's coming up and, the next event, and I'm going to have the right questions and all, what's going to happen here. Like, there's a saying too that I really like that says, if you worry, you don't need to be worried. If you don't worry, you need to be worried, which basically means that a certain amount of worry is helpful, because it means that you're trying to prepare for different scenarios that might come to you. And if you don't worry about anything, well, then something might catch you off guard at some point that you're going to be in trouble, whether that's, real life danger or financial danger or something like that. So I don't know I'd be curious to know if you had a reaction to the anxiety, stress thing. That seemed to be what you might have picked up on, but yeah, or anything that I was going down the road there.
I mean, a little bit. I think the thing that, it's funny because let me think of how to say this without mentioning like too many specifics. So my wife and I were at a function of friends, and it would seem that the writing is on the wall for one of our friends. They're gonna go through a divorce, and this couple had been together for, I think, married 10 years, and I just recently met one of the other spouse, and was a thing where the spouse I'm used to seeing, this person and I were talking, and I was like, well, how are you doing? And it was like, oh, I'm not doing super great. And I was like, oh, and I don't know how I came to this conclusion, but I was just like, don't tell me you're getting a divorce or you're thinking about that. Cause and then they were like, well, how did you come to that conclusion? I was like, I don't know.
Wow.
I don't know if like now that like when I pay, cause again, going back to like being a bar person and being the eyes and ears, like sometimes I don't want to engage. Like sometimes I just want to sit there. But by doing that, I'm paying attention to body language. I'm paying attention to things you're saying and how you're saying and, things like that. And I just kind of like, was like, I don't know. When you're with us, it seems like you're having a great time, but you have to cram all this good time into a very finite amount of time. Like you're just rushing to get to the best part of this hangout. And then it seems like when you got to go, you don't want to. And to me, that either is, I could be speaking out of turn, but I was like, it just seemed like when I see that, the only other time I've seen that really in a completely different capacity is when we have another friend who is divorced, and it's when this person comes and hangs out with us when they don't have their kid. And it's like, it's almost like I got to cram all the fun I can into this very short amount of time. And I don't understand what that's like necessarily, because that's not my life. But looking at it objectively from an outsider's perspective, it's like, I totally understand that. And to me, maybe I would start wondering and guessing, at what point do you realize that maybe there's something else wrong and you need to figure that out? And I think that's something that I've always been really good at. For me is kind of, the old saying, for every one finger you point, you got, technically the answer is 4, but really your thumb doesn't point back at you. So I've always thought that analogy was wrong, because I'm like, it's technically 3, but whatever. But it's a thing where, I've always been more apt to look inward when I have problems, because it's like I'm the only constant. And how can I expect anyone to know what I'm thinking if either A, I don't figure it out myself, or secondly, internalize and communicate? And I think that's been a strong point, like you were talking about how, you think your wife balances, and I would say both of you probably balance each other out. And, like I was saying earlier about work people, like something I'm really good at is identifying people's strengths, putting them together with someone who doesn't have that as a strength or doesn't have that as a weakness. And then you kind of balance each other out. So therefore you're not really strong or weak in anything. You're just good. And it's a good balancing act for work. And I think that most relationships should be that, especially your spousal relationships. And I would say like something my wife has really taught me is to be more regimented and kind of methodical in my way of approaching things. Whereas I think I also I balance her out because she is very quick to make decisions. She overplans and does a lot of these things. Whereas I'm more of like, it's fine. It'll be fine. Even if it's not, it will be fine eventually. Because life always has a way of working itself out. But I think the thing I notice about so many people is just that, like, when something's wrong, typically they blame so many other people. And it's like, you're the only constant in this. Like, I remember telling a friend who, when I asked about a relationship he was in, and he was like, oh, we broke up, that person's crazy. And I was like, dude, it is really crazy. No pun intended. everyone you date is crazy, but you're the only constant other than them. At what point do you start looking at yourself and going, what am I causing? How could I prevent even these things? And I I don't know, I look at dating in that same, or like relationships like that, just in the same way. It's like, if you're not happy, man, it's just not worth it. And like my wife and I talk about it all the time, and people think it's really weird that we talk about getting a divorce, but not in the sense that we want to currently, but it's a thing where I feel like I joke that it's like a phone plan. I think every year or two, maybe you need to check in with each other and just see, do you want to re-up? Do you want to go for another 1 year or two on this contract? Or is it time to be done? Because we, as we get older, change. It would be insane to think that you and your wife been together 21 years. Are you the same people you were when you first met?
Nope.
Exactly. And I think it's unrealistic of us to think that we're going to be the same forever. I would hope that we all grow. I hope that we would get to grow together. But maybe that's not how it looks. And you just got to be honest with yourself and with the other person. And I just
you know what? It's an interesting point, because we'll do something too where we kind of do probably something similar to what you do. Is we'll still say, well, if it ever doesn't work out, which I hope that we stay together till death do us part. But like you said, you never know. But I think the other thing about being honest about that is, and I like the term you use, checking in. But one of the things that I kind of keep in mind is we should both be here because we both still want to be here. And I'll even say things, she might say something like, oh, I bet you think she's really hot. Or I'll say, that she'll say something about some guy. And I'll say something like, well, hey, if you really think that that's what you want, like, go ahead. Like, we'll split everything in half, and you can go see if you want that. She's like, oh, I'm just kidding or whatever. But honestly, like no hard feelings. I mean, if something's changed but I think having, kind of that half joking conversation, it's a good way to just, I guess, reinforce that. Just so we're still clear, we're both here because we both want to be here. And if one of us thinks that you can go do something where you'd be more happy, something else, let's just be honest about it. We don't have to have a big fight about it. We got kids. We've got a bunch of stuff that we've accumulated. Let's just split it up and move on. And, that might be really cold to some degree to say, like, hey, if we really, really loved each other deeply and thought we were each other's soulmates, shouldn't there be nothing that would even have us maybe talking about those kind of things? But on the other hand, sure, it seems to work okay for us because, yeah, you know what? We still, when we get away and do something with other kids, we still like to have dinner together and go to concerts together and comedy shows together. And it's good to just remember. And that way, you also don't, when your relationship kind of flows like that, I think it also helps prevent from these terrible stories you hear about someone being abusive to the other one, or someone being a narcissist, or, someone staying in a relationship because they feel like they can't get out. And,
right.
That's a really terrible situation that, when you hear about those situations. So,
well, I think the other thing too is, like, I know for me at least, the other side of that too is, and this is, I was kind of alluding to this earlier and I didn't finish my thought because my brain just goes and I'm like, this is where I'm going now. But also stopping for a minute and under, like, the intent. I kind of talked about that a handful of times already, but, like, case in point, my wife's watching and loves terrible reality TV. That's not really my bag. So I could sit there and make fun of it and make her feel like, be like, you're so smart. How can someone so smart watch something so stupid? And just things like that.
It's an escape, right? It's a distraction.
Sure, 100%. Yeah, 100%. But what I choose to do is be more mindful of what I'm doing. So instead of going, okay, my instinct is to say this is dumb and put it down, I'm going to take a second and go and change my perspective on it. So instead of being negative, I'll take that same amount of time and then go, okay, you enjoy your show. You enjoy your time watching it. I'll go do something that I want to do that you probably have no interest in, whether that be podcasting, video games, whatever, watching basketball. Yep. I'll go do something else. And then I think the better part of that is it allows us to also each have our own time. So then when we come back, we're a little bit refreshed because we got to do the thing we wanted to. And I think that's such a huge thing that I don't think a lot of people go into it with in anything. It's so easy to be negative right out the gate. I mean, just lowest common denominator. Like, I gotta go to work today. I don't want to go to work today. I want to go to the bar and hang out with my friends. Well, how about, I mean, that's a little bit harder scenario, but like internally I would be like, okay, I'm hanging out with my friends on Friday night. It's Tuesday. Basketball game on Wednesday. I'm looking forward to that. Celtics are playing. Lakers. Can't wait to see that. LeBron's been playing really great. I'll watch that game. I'll go to bed. Thursday, I know work's going to be pretty easy because I've already prepped and done all my stuff and da-da-da-da-da. And then next thing you know, like, now it's Friday. And, like, I got through the work week that I didn't want to go to. And it's just, again, kind of that little bit of a carrot. Just, like, again, changing the mindset of, like, I don't want to be negative. It's, if you are negative all the time, how can it not manifest and correlate into so many other things that you're doing? And then no one's going to want to hang out with you anyway because you're just always that negative cloud about things. So instead, it's like, try to have as much of a positive mindset as you can. And it's crazy how it completely changes everything around you.
Yeah, it's true. And even, literally, because then you'll find that when you are more positive, even if you kind of put on a positive face when you don't really feel like it on that certain morning or that certain day, right? And then all of a sudden, maybe you're saying hi to that. When I go to my work, there's a couple security officers there when I walk in, and good morning, and even if I'm not feeling the same level of good morning as a certain morning, they know that I'm going to say good morning to them. So maybe they're up a little bit, right? And so then sometimes they'll say good morning to me, and maybe that'll lift me up a little bit on that day. But it's kind of like it's a cool circular thing. Like, you can literally start to influence the environment around you because you get that positivity back when you put it out there also, right? That's kind of cool how it works. Yeah.
Kind of speaking of positivity and being influenced and being inspired by things. So we both inadvertently, I didn't know this until the day afterward, both went and saw Metallica here in Detroit. You went to both nights, I think?
I did.
Okay. Thankfully, thank you, Patrick, only went to the one night because I didn't have to pay to go, which was the only... I had made a joke because I didn't think tickets were going to be that much. And we were like, oh, we should buy tickets and go surprise Patrick and go see him. And then I knew that it was in the round, and I knew that tentatively he'd be playing in one of 4 places in theory. So I was trying to figure out, based on wide shots, like, is he always in the same spot so I could try to go to that part of the floor. And I remember Bridget was like, well, how much do you think floor seats are? I was like, I mean, they're going to be expensive, probably like, and in my head, I was like, maybe like $400 each or something like that. No. And then I looked it up and I was like, holy shit. And I remember posting about it on Instagram. I was like, good for Metallica getting the bag. Holy shit. These tickets are so much money. And it's like, in my head, I'm like, okay, like you're playing in a stadium, an arena. Like, couldn't you kind of scale some ticket prices back to make everything more cost efficient? But I guess not. But it was a thing where, like, I'd never seen Metallica, so that was my first time. And it was just, the whole thing was like, to see a show of that level, I think is just so interesting. Like, from me as someone who used to book shows to understanding production and the crew that it takes to assemble all of that, and just seeing slowly a stadium filling up where you're like there was at one point, I think during Five Finger, I looked around, I was like, whew, Metallica, can't even pull in a half of Ford Field. And then I swear by the time first few notes of Metallica's set came on, I look around, it's full, all of it. And I'm like, how? And just taking it all in, like just the sheer size of magnitude of a stadium show, and then it's a metal band of all things, and all the thoughts I had watching that show. And to me, once I saw that you had gone, being a drummer, you can say however you feel about Lars. It's a lot of opinions out there. But what was it like for you to be that close, getting to see him perform? And was he one of your bigger inspirations starting out?
Yes. So the reason I am a drummer is because of hearing Injustice for All. So long story short, I was at a friend's birthday party. I'm sorry?
That's why you're not a bass player.
Very true.
Sorry, low hanging fruit. Couldn't
No, I
miss that
love
one.
it. So I was at a friend's birthday party in 7th grade, and somebody had brought over this VHS video, and I saw people stage diving and crowd surfing. I'd never seen that before. It ended up being a Minor Threat video. And I had been kind of a pop fan before that. And I said, "What is that?" And they said, "Oh, it's this band Minor Threat. They're a punk band." I had no idea that realm of music even existed. I said, "Oh, is there something like this out there that I could dip my toes in the water?" He said, "Oh yeah, this band Metallica. I'd never heard of them. Has a new album called Injustice for All." Had my mom buy me the tape at Meyer and put it in the Walkman, laying down to bed. And as soon as the drums and guitars all kicked in, like my jaw hit my chest, and I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'd grown up taking piano lessons, so I had a musical background. And the thing that struck me right away was just the talent that I knew that it took to kind of play anything that fast. And for whatever reason, probably because the drums are tuned way up crazily in that record, they just really stood out to me. And I thought, oh my gosh, I want to play drums like that. So Lars definitely was an influence of mine. Like you said, a lot of opinions now that you have a broader view on the world, and I've seen a lot of shows and listened to a lot of records, you realize that, he might not be the most consistent drummer, but he still has influenced a whole generation, and I will never take that away from him. So he definitely goes up on my list high for influences. To your point about the expense of the show, I was not going to go because I'm kind of a cheapskate when it comes to tickets, especially because I've gotten to tour with some great bands and see a lot of awesome bands. One of my best friends who I saw Metallica with a lot of times in high school and beyond bought us the snake pit tickets without me knowing. And I said, "I cannot spend that kind of money on the tickets." He said, "Well, you're going, and I know you can probably come up with the money. So if you want to stiff me on the money, that's up to you, but you're going no matter what." So
fair enough.
So I was
I'd be like,
grateful.
I'll buy you some beers.
That's all right. So when it was all said and done, I can't believe that I spent that kind of money on those tickets, but it was in the top 10 best days of my life. So it was awesome. Yeah, I mean, again, just Metallica's meant so much to me, and it literally changed the course of my life, because I probably wouldn't have played the drums, and I wouldn't have done the Taproot thing, and I might not have met my wife, because I kind of met her when I was in between med school and going into the band thing. And so then I think about, like, if I hadn't met her, I might not have had my kids. And so again, I tie a lot of that mentally in with me hearing about Metallica. So I was emotional for most of the time that I was watching them. And it's just like they're kind of they're my heroes, particularly probably Lars and James, since they're kind of the brains of the band. And I love all the guys, but it was incredible. I was probably, I couldn't have been more than 10 feet away from them, oftentimes. And just to be able to actually see them in their face, and them, making eye contact with me a couple times, is just incredible. So I loved it. It was fantastic. And I will tell you one interesting thing. So I got to meet without giving too much away, I got to meet someone that works for them. And I was asking her about the production and just kind of trying to get as much insider info as I could. She said that they built all that production stuff from the ground up. So in case anyone out there doesn't know, they built a whole crazy stage in the round, and they had these huge pillars with like these really advanced video screens and speakers. Yeah. They built that whole thing without any concern for expense. And apparently they lost money in Europe, despite how well they still do everywhere in the world. And they didn't make as much money as you would think that they made, even playing to sold out stadiums in the US. Now, part of that also is because they're really big on paying all of their people that are on their crew like an annual salary, even when they are only doing shows every few weekends. So they're really kind of generous in that way. And so even though tickets are really expensive, they put a lot of their money into their production, and they pay their crew very well. So they might not make as much money on shows as you might think, which is pretty wild.
I'm sure that by all accounts at this point, a lot of what they do, because like look at like Orion Fest,
right?
You know, the second and last year they did it was here in Detroit on I think it was on Belle Isle Park if I'm not mistaken,
Yep.
and by most accounts, the people that I know that went to it was like, oh, it was a huge success, and we were expecting another one to be announced next year, maybe here or Chicago or wherever. And apparently that like never was successful, either iteration, but it was sort of something where they just, you know, give back and they understand. And I think to a degree, they're probably at a point where it's like they have other avenues for income. So it's like, you know, kind of like I was saying sort of before, where it's like not always, you don't need to always have the one thing be the one thing, where it's like, okay, maybe we can do more with this, but we don't need it to have as much of an ROI because this brings in a little bit and this brings in a little bit, and we can kind of pull from other things and it'll be okay in the grand scheme of things. Like we're not hurting. And I think, you know, I think after a certain point, like, you know, they're doing something very akin to Pantera at this point, or what Pantera used to do and what Pantera does now. Again, now that they're back, where it's like they just do things that they want to do because they want to do it. They pick the bands they want because they want them to be out with them.
Yep.
They don't have to. They could 100% just be like, you know, shit. I'm sure they could probably pull a Machine Head and just be like, we're the only band playing. We're playing for 3 hours. You get just us. And I'm sure, you know, and then they would get all the money. Don't have to pay any opening bands. No, nothing. But the fact that, like, you know, I remember talking to Patrick when it was just them doing the Vegas show and the show, I think it was in Buffalo where he's from, and being like, you and Greta Van Fleet were the only two bands picked. How's that? He's like, that's fucking wild, man. Like, that's, I don't know. It's weird. It's Metallica.
Yeah, was he able to share any insights? I mean, did he get to like hang with them much or talk to him much?
So through, because Doc Coyle is in a band with Kirk and Robert called the Wedding Band, and they're basically just a glorified cover band, like a wedding band. And so through Doc's podcast, you get a lot more insight into how, and he did an episode with Robert about a year or so ago.
Oh, cool.
That like went everywhere. But it was like a thing where, you know, the thing I think that everyone kind of forgets, they've been doing it for so long. So it's like they're sort of at the same level. I think like when people are so surprised at how welcoming and accommodating like a band like Iron Maiden is, like by all accounts, everyone I know that has toured with Iron Maiden at this point, I think it's like 2 or 3 bands I know where someone personally in the band, I'm like, they're so nice. They like the first day you get a card and a bottle of champagne, and you know sometimes the guys will come, someone will come by and just be like, hey, how are you doing? Is the tour treating you okay? Everything all right? And you're like, yeah, everything's great. Other than getting shit thrown at you because you're not Iron Maiden to their fans. But beside that, it definitely is a thing where, you know, I know Doc has talked about, I think it was, I forget the show, but they were on their way. They were on like the golf cart going to the stage because, you know, everything's to a track and they got to be done at a certain point for changeovers and all that. You know, the show has to, it's pretty regimented from start to finish. And he was like, I think it was like James and Lars and somebody else were like, hey guys, and just wanted to shoot the shit. And you're like, yeah, it's great, man. I got to go. We got to go play. So I think it's by all accounts, like I think they understand, you know, the magnitude of who they are to everybody.
Yeah.
And understand the experience that they're giving everyone. And, you know, I think as I listen to a lot of other podcasts and, you know, YouTube clips and stuff of people interviewing other people, and like, you know, I think I forget who it was. Someone was like in a movie with Robert De Niro, and he went to the person. He's like, "Hi, I'm Bob," and then they're like, "Hey," and he's like, "Just it's okay," and like he was like he gives you the moment to realize like it's a lot because of who he is. And I think when you get to a level of that, I think there's a little bit of understanding. Like, to me, I'm just me, but I understand I am something bigger to everyone else, and I can't change how that is. I could be a dick about it, but I think it's easier just to kind of have some humility and grace and just kind of understand that and kind of lean into it. And kind
Such
of
a great point.
the person realize that like I'm just a person too. And I think like what's been crazy, and like there's been a handful of people I've had on here where I still get like beforehand or during or whatever, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm talking to so and so. Or in some situations where I'm like, I can't believe so and so is like my friend and I can text them. Like that still trips me out. But it's a thing where at the end of the day, like they're just people, man. And
Right.
as much as I still want to fanboy out about a lot of it and what, like I could sit there and tell you, like, I remember how stoked I was the day I learned how to play Poem on guitar, at least the opening chord progression. That was really cool. And getting to see you guys and all of this stuff, like I could do that 100%. But like, it's not that I don't want to, but to me, at least in our relationship as it stands, like I enjoy the fact that I can just talk to you because you're.
Well, by the way, it's still super cool for you to share those stories, right? I mean, and I can still have an appreciation for that. But this, like the fact that we're friends is cool too. So they can both still coexist, right?
I think the hard part for me, and again, it kind of goes back to like imposter syndrome stuff. Like I often joke sometimes with some people where they're like, "Oh, it's like hit me up," and I'm like, "Yeah." And then sometimes I'll send a text. I'm like, "Hey man, sorry to bother you," and they're like, "You're not bothering me. It's a text. I can get to it when it's convenient for me." And I go, yeah, I don't know. In my head, I just always assume like asking for anything or like it's a bother. And I even feel that about my friends, like my actual friends, like that have nothing going on in their lives comparatively, like where it's like, yeah, man, I got a meet and greet and I have press I got to do or da 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 da, like where your day on a day sheet is planned out. It's like I have friends that don't have that, and I still feel like I'm bothering them. So it's just like a thing where I have to work on that myself and just be like, hey, like fire off a text, let someone know how you feel about them, or hey, this thing, or whatever. I don't know. Like, I meant to text you after your show here in GR, where I was gonna be like, it was really cool for me, and this is how I was gonna tie the Metallica thing, because I feel like maybe it was your opportunity to have that same experience, where it's like when you guys everyone on the stage. And to me, it was just fun to watch you playing and being a part of your show, seeing everything from your perspective and seeing you in your moment, in your element. And I'm sure that you get to have that little bit of fandom when you go to a Metallica show and you're 10 feet away, or you're getting to have as close of an experience as you possibly can in that same capacity. And to me, it's those moments where I start looking at it going like, we're all the same, man. We're all inspired by things. We all want to have fun. At the end of the day, we're all just people, and we just need to be reminded of that sometimes and stop putting people on pedestals and just enjoy the moments with these people.
So I have the perfect tie-in for that. So I had a guy message me on Facebook like a week or two ago, and he said, do you and people in your position understand what kind of an influence that you have on people? And I said, that's an interesting question. So I kind of wrote a pretty long response back, and I totally tied in. I made the comparison of Metallica being my favorite band to essentially having to come to the conclusion that some people will say that Taproot is their favorite band, and it's still maybe this is also a version of imposter syndrome, but I can't fathom that could compare anywhere to how I feel about Metallica as someone might feel about my little rock band, right? And so, but over time, people have said it enough, and they seem like they're not crazy, and they actually mean it. So I've had to come to accept it, and so then I have to just appreciate it and respond accordingly, like the same way that, I would expect James to respond if I said that to him or said something along those lines. And so then I kind of used the Metallica example, and I said, I just went to Metallica show, and it was, one of the top probably 10, 20 days of my life. My wife doesn't like when I say that, because she's like, what about your marriage? And what about the birth of your kids? I said, yeah, that's like numbers, 1 through 6, right?
They're in there. Trust me.
That's right. They're in there. But, and then he sent me a picture of our New York City show when he was up on stage, and I was like in the background as a selfie. He said, this was probably one of the top 10 moments of my life, next to my marriage and the birth of my kids. And I was like, holy crap. That was really crazy. But the other thing that, before you kind of made that connection at the end of your point, what I thought of was when James was on Joe Rogan, he talked a lot about how he really wants to get to know people. And he talked a little bit about how he says, when I meet somebody, they already know a lot about me and I don't know anything about them. So we're at a disadvantage. So I want to know more about them. So I've always had in my head, if I ever have the opportunity to, I've kind of met him officially one time, shook his hand. We were backstage back in Pine Knob in like 92 or something. But if I ever had a chance to kind of have a conversation with him, I would start off by saying, hey, let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then we can kind of go from there. And I think that'd be a more entertaining way for us to start off a conversation than just be like, oh, when I saw you guys back in 91. And right. So I thought that's cool that he's kind of, to your point about the Robert De Niro thing, he's put that out in the world. And now hopefully if people heed what he's asking for, then maybe they approach him more often like that. And then he can have more of a meaningful experience in, meeting people for the first time.
Yeah, I was just having this experience the other day. We went and saw a show on Saturday of a up and coming band that actually the whole bill was all up and coming bands. That my wife was into one of them. She'd been trying to see them the last couple of times that come through or been near, and just one thing or another happened, and we haven't been able to go. And it was at the Sanctuary. I don't know if you've ever been there or played there or anything.
I have not.
Okay, so it's like if I had to guess, maybe like a 300-400 cap room.
Okay.
So that kind of a space. But it was interesting because I'm used to, especially when you go to shows like that, I expect there to be we're here to see this band, the headliner or whatever, or we're here to one band is who everyone's really there to see, or the fans will be this is the band I came to see. The other two are just whatever. And from the jump, first band came on, this band called Nerve. Sorry to be so judgy, but there was a dude that was had blacked out sleeves, black grease paint all over his neck and stuff. And I was oh, okay, I kind of had an idea that one of the bands we were there to see was kind of heavier, but I was oh, maybe another band on here is just a straight up hardcore band or something, and I just don't know. And the first band was pretty pop metal-y kind of stuff. And this dude was singing every word. He was front and center, just getting down. And I was didn't have that on my bingo card for this show. But right. It was crazy to see. I had so many thoughts, and as I do when I go to shows, it's just hard not to. Like I said, from being involved in shows in the music scene in a lot of different ways. First of all, side tangent, I can't believe how great bands sound, even at a small level like that, where I'm man, you're all playing to clicks. You got your backing tracks, because obviously you can't afford to have all the people on stage with you to do that. Just is what the industry is now. Everyone's got a nice rack system with 2 different Kempers going and all the stuff. And you're just man, when I was growing up, it would be one dude's got a shitty 8x10 bass rig. You're lucky if someone's got 2 combo amps, both guitar players, no backup guitars, no nothing, no text, none of this stuff. And I'm you guys are playing 300 cap rooms. The whole package tour of the bill all has social media people. You have different rigs on either side. It looks so professional and so good. And you're just man, it's a different era of coming up to be a band, and it's shocking to see how great bands can be. Don't have to blow out your ears to achieve that same full sound.
That's cool.
I just kept thinking about that. I was this is different. But I also was just I'm not used to going to see bands of this ilk, of this size, where literally from the first band all the way to the end, everybody is into all of it. And
yeah,
it just was crazy. Because I'm and then I was looking up the very first band. It's oh, they're going out with, Asking Alexandria and coming up soon. And I was really? I did not think that is not a tour I would have thought that they would have been able to get on. But I was pleasantly surprised, and I was it makes sense sound-wise for everything that's on that tour. Could have been a buy-on situation, I don't know, but either way, it's that's also part of the industry, and sometimes that's the risk you take, where it's I think the juice is worth the squeeze. Let's go in and fully commit to ourselves and believing in ourselves that we'll make the money back in merch or something, and go do it. And I mean, they're all young. I think if I had to guess, I think most of the oldest one, I think, was probably 26 or 27. But it was just crazy just to see this. And I get constantly reminded going to some of these shows where I feel like the old man like screaming on the, out the window at shit. Like, it's not like it used to be. It's not how I came up or whatever. But at the end of the day, it changes, and I should just be excited that are actually wanting to go see live music in some sort of a capacity. And at the end of the day, that's what I kind of keep telling myself.
So true. What do you think is, you talk to a lot of bands. So what is the sort of financial climate out there? I mean, do you get a sense that it's any better or any worse than it used to be in terms of people coming to shows and being able to support doing some kind of a small tour? Or is it kind of the same as it's always been, where it's a struggle until you get to a certain level? And I don't know, what kind of sense do you get? I mean, I'm sure it's all over the map, but can you kind of summarize that in any certain kind of way?
I feel like at times it's the same as it's always been.
Yep.
It's always a struggle. It's always going to be whatever. But kind of go into something I saw like in the last couple of days, actually. Like a friend of mine's band, they're getting ready to do a little run supporting somebody. And they were like, oh, we're looking at doing a bandwagon. Bandwagons are X amount. We're looking at just renting a 15-passenger van. That was X amount. And then I saw another friend that is from out here that's also in a touring band. And he was like, dude, hit me up. And then he's like, I got the secret. And basically they went through somewhere else and rented a RV. Sprinter van, basically, like you were talking about. And then I saw like the next day, like my friend posted, he's like, it's crazy that in today's touring industry, like how everyone knows that everything costs and da-da-da-da-da, why people are still overcharging for these things when I was just able to get like a brand new like sprinter van, da-da-da-da-da, or an RV even, and it was cheaper than getting like a bandwagon or all of these things that had better amenities and all this kind of stuff. So I feel like because of podcasting, I feel like because of social networking and YouTube and all that kind of stuff, I feel like the horror stories are always out there. Someone will always try to take advantage of you. I think that's just the nature of the business. But I think a lot of the artists are trying to work together to figure out how to change the industry for the betterment of themselves. A big switch that I've seen a lot more recently is, a part of it is to dealing with the profilers and stuff. Now you don't have to bring as much gear. You have more of the DI stuff. So it's like all you need is this thing, and then it plugs into this. And now I don't need to bring a bunch of cabs, which cuts down on weight on your trailer. And especially if you're doing, spot dates or flying or going overseas, like I don't need to bring a whole rig with me. Now I can just bring this thing, which can be carried on with me and only cost me $75 versus thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And oh, hey, you also broke my pedal board because somehow my pedal board got broken into on my flight. Just things like that. So I think the industry collectively, the artists are figuring out ways that make things make sense for them. You're seeing a lot of re-records for a lot of classic records. So then that way, I'm not sure if it's like sunset clauses, if it's just straight up that the rights to whatever is gone and diverting back to the artist, but you're seeing a lot more artists getting ahead of the streaming and the DSP stuff and understanding contracts and how, I think a big proponent was Josta. It was a big one to kind of open my eyes to this, because the beginning of his show up until a handful of years ago, he was a strong proponent. Oh, we're getting fucked on Spotify. Us artists are getting fucked. We're getting fucked. Then he put out a solo record that he, I think crowdfunded or mostly paid for himself, and maybe some crowdfunding where, you get to be an executive producer at a certain tier and all this kind of stuff. And then he started changing his tune and be like, did you know, when you own your masters, when you own everything, that Spotify check's actually not really that bad. And it was interesting to see how just doing something as simple as let's figure out a new way to do the thing. And now all of a sudden, the thing that you used to complain about, you're like, actually, it's not that bad. It's just that you have so many hands in the pot, in the budget, and the pie, that by the time it gets to you, it's like, well, that wasn't really worth it. So I think that's the thing, is I think everyone's just being smarter about how they're doing it. And I think some of the other thing that you see a lot of successful bands, in my opinion, seeing a lot of successful bands doing is they're able to kind of keep it all, do everything internally. So you look at, for me, you look at a band like, as I'm wearing a Kill Switch Engage shirt, So Adam T does production. He records everything. Their bass player Mike is a graphic designer. That's like his other job outside of the band. So he does most of the merch designs. He does album covers and stuff like that. And everyone kind of is able to do something to help the band be monetarily a little bit more smart with how they proceed in their career. I think you also look at a lot of these young people in the music industry, like, a lot of the publicist side of things I see. I think a handful of them obviously used to work like in the big budget, like major label system, working at Roadrunner, working at, some of these other labels, but seeing the downfall of the label because it was just a turnover and it didn't matter. It's a product and just get out whatever's going to be hot, or just basically like throwing spaghetti on a wall. Like, all right, well, this one's stuck. Okay, find 15 more like that so we can try to just cash in on this thing, this sound. And I think a lot of these people, even though it's being spread out more into like, well, I started with this group of people and then I wanted to do my own thing, so I'm branching off and doing this. But you take the clientele and the roster and the years in the industry that you've come to learn, and you're now applying that to maybe like, looking at someone like Amy from Atom Splitter who worked with Roadrunner and starting her own boutique label, but like brought Killswitch, brought a lot of the bands she serviced back in the day, and being like, I want to build with you guys. Now working more with straight up labels and being like, I'll take on your newer bands, your baby bands, and work with them and get them in front of the right people and try to help grow them. And I think you have people who want to be a part of the industry and want to see it change and be better than it was maybe for them. And I think that's the biggest thing that I'm noticing is it just seems like there's, again, this word, there's more intent behind everything. I think you can't just go into it and go, okay, well, I want a career. And you could luck into it if you were good enough. I think now you need to be a lot more mindful of what you're doing, and you can't just kind of half-ass an idea and just, well, I'll figure it out as I go. And it's like, you can't do that anymore. And I think the other thing too is I think with how social media has given everyone a voice, like kind of going back to the show that I just went and saw this past weekend, it was crazy. I was shocked at how many women were at the show. And I was saying something to my wife and our friend, actually, you probably saw Dale, tall security guy, at the Intersection show. Him and his wife were at the show too. And Dale and I had been talking like, yeah, my wife likes this band Archers and we're going to go and it'll be cool to hang out with you guys. Well, I ended up finding out through my wife and his wife that apparently the bass player of Archers is like, I had a really huge following on TikTok. Like, I think they showed me and he had like 1.4 million followers, which is even more than the band itself.
Right.
So like they have a person in their band that has a following that is bringing people out to the show.
Wow.
And you could say like, okay, that's helping me. And, I'm going to set up a conversation. I just saw the singer actually of Archers just messaged me back because I was like, oh, I want to get on the ground floor of this. And I have a lot of questions to ask because I like to do that with some of the younger bands. Like, how are you traversing this industry? Because I feel like now is the worst time to get into it. It's so much harder. Like all the things that you have to do to be successful are the things that like, I don't want to do. I don't want social media anymore. I don't want to have to create reels and content. Like I'm over it. Half my life has been spent doing that crap, and I just don't want to anymore. But it's a necessary part of the game. And I feel like I'm willing to be where I'm at, but it's interesting to see how like the younger generation has really taken to technology and made it work for them and figuring out ways to make it in an industry which was so hard to get into now. And I think the biggest part of it is kind of, you said the why. What, like, or your what even, like, what do you want out of this? Why do you want to do this? And I feel like so many people aren't disillusioned into being like, I want to be a rock star, playing a 300, 400 cap room, having some of it sell out, and knowing you're kind of on the come up because of your grind. Like, this band Archers has been a thing since, 2015. That doesn't sound like a long time, but they're approaching 10 years and like 2 more years or another year. I only just heard of them. And they're just now kind of starting to get some really good success doing a small headlining run. And it seems like this is kind of where they're either going to hit that next level or this is kind of where they're going to cap out. And to me, that's really interesting. And I want to see where it's at because it's like, man, you're 10 years in. Are you, if this doesn't take off from here, are you guys going to be like, we're done? Because there's got to be a little bit of looking internally and being like, okay, can't keep doing this, or can I? And at what cost? And what is it worth? And that's interesting to me. But I don't know. I feel like there's so much more transparency than there's ever been in the industry. I feel like the old system is slowly being changed. I mean, like, I don't know how much you see these stories, but like, there's a band, the Callous Dowboys. They refused to sell merch at a show as I'm recording 2 nights ago in Milan, because the venue wanted a 47% cut.
Wow.
And they're like, nope, we're not doing that.
Yeah, good for them.
But I mean, it's like now you're having bands legitimately going, hey, this venue costs or is charging us blank. That's not fair. Let's look at the legalese of it. Like, how can we change it? And I think that's the thing, is on such a smaller microcosm of how the world is working currently, where so many people feel like their voices don't work and change doesn't happen. You're seeing it in the music industry slowly, but I also feel like it kind of maybe could be the spark maybe of like change happening beyond just music and like politics and so forth. I don't have much hope in that, but seeing it happen, at least in rock and metal and so forth, it's like, it seems like something is happening and it's changing, and it's interesting because you guys are getting into it. I'm sure so much has changed. Like, that's actually, I'll throw the question back to you. I don't know how involved you were in the release aspect of this thing, as far as getting, radio promotion and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
How, because, we listen to Turbo and Octane and stuff like that, so we've heard some Taproot songs and heard the voiceover bumper ads playing, and you guys did that at some point. But how did you find it to navigate the new ways to get your music out there, and touring even?
Yeah, so you made a lot of really good points about the transparency and the availability of information, and I can tell you that there are some bands out there that, and you mentioned a couple of them, and I probably shouldn't say the names, but I can tell you there's one band that we did a couple shows with that is well known, that re-recorded some songs, and same thing to what I think you said, Jamie Josta said pretty publicly, that he said, yeah, you'd be really surprised. They took their biggest song and re-recorded it, and they made more money from that re-record than I'm
going to take a stab in the dark, because this person was pretty vocal about it on social media. It's Nonpoint, wasn't it?
Well, that's not the one that I was thinking of. But
okay, because I was going to say, Rob's been pretty vocal about when they got the masters back to, not Statement, it was one of their other records, but he was like, man, this record's doing really well for us, and the fact that everyone supported it even after it being out for 10 plus years, that's like it's allowing us to make the new record. It's funding all these things for us. So like, again, kind of the transparency, but like, I know that was a big thing for them, kind of coming out of the same class of, era that you guys did.
No, that's good to hear. So and that was the other band I was thinking of. But so Elias and Rob have figured out so much of this stuff about really kind of getting into detail about how they spend their money. And Elias even went on a big thing about how they used to, and this will tie into your question about kind of what we did, but about how you spend your money on radio promotion. I don't think it's much of a secret anymore that, in a lot of cases you are expected to spend a certain amount of money with certain radio outlets. Some places will still play your songs, for free if they're independent and they've got the right backer. But, Elias talks a lot about how before, whenever they would just cut a check to this promotions company to say, oh yeah, we're going to promote whatever single it is at radio, he's gotten a lot more involved to say, no, okay, we're going to work together. I'm going to figure out exactly how many dollars I'm going to spend in whatever market, and exactly when we're going to spend those dollars based on when we're going to be there, and what that timing will end up being with the radio play relative to when we're playing and the next time they're going to be in the market. So he's gotten a lot more detail about that, which is really smart. And yeah, I did ask him, I said, so in terms of your different income streams, how does touring versus, radio versus streaming versus merch? He's like, oh, streaming is number one. I was like, oh, really? Okay. So that really opened up my eyes. So, and I think he did say that they're slowly trying to figure out how they can buy back parts of their catalog. And he even said that I think they've even done it for certain songs. I think they may have bought Bullet with a Name. but not the whole record. So, so yeah, super interesting in terms of our stuff. So we partnered with, well, I should say Steven partnered with Tom Hazart, who has his own label, THC. And essentially, and I don't know, I don't claim to know all the details, but they kind of split the record between the two of them. So essentially, Tom and the company put up a lot of the money to essentially, make the posters and actually press the CDs and the vinyl and all those kind of things. And so they're kind of splitting that, and also kind of fronting the money for finalizing the production and the mixing and mastering. And then I do know that there was some, they did decide to spend a little bit of money on some promo. However, and it wasn't a huge dollar amount, but also you had mentioned Sirius XM. I don't think that we ever really got favorite song on there, even though there was kind of a media push on it. And from what I couldn't understand, maybe you have some insight into this. It sounds like, for better or for worse, it just sounds like there is a certain person that does the programming there that, maybe didn't care that much for the song / kind of thought that maybe Taproot wasn't, a hip enough band anymore to really put behind it. So, it is what it is. Maybe some of that's rumors. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not true. But I don't think that we either kind of got the push there that we were looking for, or / I don't think that we really spent the money that maybe we would have needed to spend to really get a big push there. The one other thing I'll say that I learned recently about radio, which is kind of interesting, is that some of our old faithful stations that used to always play us are owned by a larger conglomerate now. So they literally have zero say on locally about what they can play. And it's essentially all kind of a big corporate playlist that they've done through their, research in terms of what the audiences want to hear. And then they tie their advertising dollars to that based on those audiences for the classic rock songs they want to hear, and your Alice in Chainses and your Godsmacks and all that. And I'm not judging. It's just interesting that it's something that has really changed since the last time we were out there, that there's a lot less independence. So we really, when we've heard about those stations that, like, I know Q106 in Lansing is still an independent station, and they were a big proponent of favorite song, which we really appreciate. So yeah, it's good to hear that there are still those stations out there, but it's definitely it's constantly evolving, and it's already changed even since I've been out of it. So
I mean, it's been crazy just to see. Even I'm not in this space in the sake of like reactions, like that's a whole nother like avenue, like on YouTube and so forth, where someone was I'm gonna blank on it, doesn't matter who the content creator was, but someone was talking about how I think, if I remember correctly, they got a copyright strike on their video of them reacting to a song. Or actually, I think what the other part of it was, maybe too, was so this person, this content creator, a label reached out and they're like, hey, we'd really love to have you do a reaction video or whatever. And the person was like, yeah, here's the going rate. And they were like, no, we're giving you free, like, we're going to promote your thing. And it was funny because the person's like, you came to me. I don't need you. Like, you came to me. And like the other part of it too that I think is interesting is that it's like, what's to stop the person just from being like, okay, well, I'll wait for the song to come out and then you get nothing. And then I get all of the things because my channel's monetized, or da-da-da-da-da. Or even the flip side of it where it's like, maybe that person's like, oh, you know what, though? I don't fuck with this band no more. And then divulges everything that, like, has happened. I mean, kind of famously, my wife has talked about, because a lot of artists that I have befriended through doing this for, 7 years and 400 plus episodes and all that, because they know I won't speak out of turn, the amount of information that people don't know that I know would probably baffle a lot of people, like inner workings of things and how things are hanging on by a tether for some of the biggest bands that you probably think are doing great, and
sure,
money problems and all that stuff. And my wife will just be sitting there, doesn't care about any of it. And so she's often jokes. She's like, yeah, if you ever piss me off enough and I want to get a divorce, I'm going to start another podcast and I'm just going to reveal everyone's secrets. And I was like, totally could, because she's sitting right there with me half the time.
Right.
So it's definitely a thing where I think there just becomes this thing right now where I think change is happening. I think it's coming. I think the old way obviously doesn't work, but we're having to wait for the old people that are still running everything to get out of the way. But I think you're seeing, like, I know someone like Amy, I know a lot of the publicists I deal with almost on a daily basis. They understand the value of this. And even more to the fact, I think something that I find interesting is that, like, most of the artists that I get sent or that I ask for, the publicist knows that I'm not really going to talk about the thing. We're going to talk. And so I know a lot of times they'll give me not a 20, 30-minute presser. They'll just give me the person when they have nothing else to do so I can take the time to go wherever the conversation's going to go, because I built up that rapport with those people that they know that, like, every time they've checked in with someone, they're like, it was really great. I had a really great time talking to someone. So it's a thing where I think the industry is kind of understanding that different mediums for promotion and getting the word out are more important now than ever. And it's funny because how is it really any different than it used to be of just word of mouth or street teams and stuff like that? This is just the new street team. I kind of realized recently, like, instead, like, because one of the perks of being a street team person, oh, you get the album earlier. Hey, you get free stuff. Well, I get albums early. I get merch sometimes sent to me, or hook up with tickets to shows and stuff like that. Like, that's awesome. Pretty much what a street team person did. Maybe you get to, meet the band or whatever, if that is a thing that is available or whatever. But essentially, I think, like, all these new avenues for things are kind of that. And I think that's always been what it needs. And sometimes it does take, a certain amount of money to get on the airways and so forth. And it seems like, by all accounts, kind of, XM and stuff like that is kind of the new radio thing. And, instead of having, 50 different radio programmers or station managers or whatever who decide whether you get on or not, like, now it's, by all accounts, it's Jose. Good, bad, or indifferent. And it just seems like that's the way it is. And
it's tough, like, it's a business, so they've had to figure out how to streamline their revenue streams, because I'm sure that their listening audience has gone down over time because of streaming and all the other places to get music. So, if their audience has gotten smaller, then they've had to figure out how to try to keep their revenue up, and maybe they have to do that to stabilize their advertising income, by making sure that they know that, okay, if you play, Alice in Chains and Nirvana and Godsmack in the middle of the day for half the day, then you're going to get X amount of listeners. And then you got the advertisers say, okay, I'll go spend money at that station. And then, so like you said, it is what it is. It's just, I don't get mad. A lot of times people, and this whole another topic, but, I happen to be in the automotive world. So, EVs are very controversial right now. Right. And so, and I happen to drive one because my client makes EVs, and I was really curious about how it's all going to work. So I've really enjoyed driving them. But, for some reason, it's this very polarizing thing where, some people think that, okay, you're going to shut down the oil and gas industry or whatever. But, my retort to that whenever it comes up is I always say, well, do you still use, like, a Kodak camera to take pictures? Do you ever listen to music on your phone? Okay, well, you taking pictures with your phone and videos with your phone and listening to music on your phone, you shut down a whole bunch of industries, including one that used to support my income, but I had to go find something else to do. So don't worry about criticizing, somebody else's supposed industry that you're going to shut down, because this is the way that stuff works. Stuff evolves, and, like, whatever. I don't sit around yelling at people that, that listen to music for $9.99 a month now on their phones, even though, a lot of people, including me, used to spend. I mean, how much did you spend on CDs when you were in tapes when you first got into music? I was probably spending $150 to $200 a month, I'll bet.
Oh man, especially, like, Best Buy New Music Tuesday, before it became Fridays, or maybe it was Wednesdays. But the best part is it was more advantageous for you to buy it the day it came out or the week it came out, because it was cheaper, because they wanted you to get it. And so it's like, okay, CDs at a certain point were like 17 to $18, almost $20, especially if it was like a double disc. Like, I remember getting Tupac, like All Eyes on Me, and that was a double disc. And it's like, okay, that's 30 something dollars. And I was like, I could get that one album, or I could get like 3 or 4 other records. Um, yeah, I think like almost every week at a certain point, I was just probably spending probably $60 a week buying new CDs at like, $10 a pop or whatever, and be like, all right, well, I got to get the new, this. And then the other thing too, that I'm not saying this doesn't happen and is not happening now, but it's like in the late 90s, early 2000s, like music was just in a completely different space, especially for someone like me who grew up on MTV, and radio was different, and top 40 radio was different, where it's like, yeah, you might have a metal band in there, you might have a pop band, an R&B band, whatever. And so it's like, okay, well, I need to pick up, the new Janet Jackson Velvet Rope record just came out, but oh shit, so did, the new Mudvayne. And like, I remember a record store day a handful of years ago. My wife went to go get some albums for me. She picked up Aaliyah, Agent, Nothing But a Number, and then the Acacia Strain, The Dead Walk. And I remember she said that the clerk behind the desk goes, "Oh, one for you and your boyfriend or something." And she goes, "No, they're both for my husband." And he goes, "Why?" Really wouldn't have expected like a death metal kind of, deathcore band and 90s R&B to be bought by the same person. But I mean, like, that's the thing for me is like, it got really expensive because I'd be like, okay, emo screamo was becoming a thing, metalcore was becoming a thing, hardcore was kind of getting bigger. Like, so many subgenres were getting branched out. Nu metal was anything from industrial to, rap rock to whatever. So whatever direction you went in with that, like, I spent a lot of money on stuff and buying just to keep up with, the different albums. And, as much as people don't want to say this really is mattered as much, but it's like, look at the compilations, like the Warped Tour compilations. Oh, Warped Tour's coming through. They just put out the compilation. I don't know all 80 something bands that are touring, so I better get that compilation and learn about maybe a new band or so that I want to see and go check out that day. Ozfest. Oh my God. Main stage. That's, Mudvayne's playing and whoever else at the time. Oh, what's on the smaller stage? Oh, this band El Nino. I don't know them. Let me check that out. Oh man, this band's really great too. Oh, Static X is breaking big. Okay, I need to go get that. And then, like those things where it's like it was like you almost had to, like, it was like a bad like drug habit of sorts, where it's like I have to keep up with all the music that's coming out, because CD burning wasn't really a thing. No one had computers or the funds to buy the blank discs and the different trays to add to your computer to burn multiple discs at once and so forth. And it just wasn't, you really had to be invested to be a fan of music. And now I don't think you have to be. And that's actually something I was just telling someone who works for to write Love on Our Arms. I was hoping he was going to be, coming around to a festival here in GR. And he's like, "Oh, I'm just doing Electric Forest." And I was like, I've always wanted to go, but I get the vibe that it is, and I see this a lot more with concerts in general. I feel like it's becoming a thing where it's cool to be at the thing, not be there for the thing. Like, I'm going to a concert because I want to see the band. I want to hear these songs. I think now it's changed and it becomes a thing where, well, all my friends are going. I don't care about the music. I'm going to talk over that. But I'm here at the thing. I can tag myself at this thing. I can take photos at this event. And it's like, but you're not here for the whole reason you're supposed to be here. And I think that's a shift in the industry as well that I've noticed for myself, is that, and it's not so much in rock and metal and so forth, but a lot of like hip hop and pop, where it's like, oh, well, this is the new big thing, so I need to be here. And you're like,
oh, that's weird.
Yeah. I'll tell you where I'm not going to be, at a show of a band I don't care about.
Exactly.
Especially with some of these ticket prices. I mean, I was kind of bummed. I bought Bryan Adams tickets and I was very excited to go see him finally. And our like week and a half of the tour got canceled, and
no way.
Oh yeah, I was real bummed. Still pretty salty about it. There's no explanation. Like, the tour is still happening leading up to our dates and after, just not ours.
Oh, that stinks. Yeah, I would love to see him.
Yeah, I was very much looking forward to it. Meanwhile, I spent I don't care about saying how much I spent. I spent almost $400 on Bryan Adams tickets for like a handful of people to go with us that were going to pay me back. But I'm still, and I'm not going to, but like I had a hard time willing to pony up $120 something to go see Pantera at the same venue. I was like, that's so much money to see this band.
Yeah,
that's
tough.
hopefully, thankfully, I'll get media passes or something, or media tickets. And even if they're in the nosebleeds, I won't care because I didn't spend the money. But it's a thing where sometimes like that's also a really weird thing. Like right now, like I just saw the Killers are reuniting with their original lineup and charging $1,800 a ticket. Yeah, exactly. You guys, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are playing the When We Were Young Fest this year? Or not When We Were Young, sorry, the Sick New World?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the last Saturday in April. And I think we're playing at the Whiskey the Wednesday before that. And then we're playing somewhere in Scottsdale, Arizona the Thursday. Then Friday we'll get to Vegas. And then Saturday we'll be at Sick New World. So, yeah.
How do you feel about that? Did you check out the year before, like at least online, and see how it looked?
I did. So I watched the summary video, which I thought was interesting because it looked really cool, but for some reason they overdubbed the studio versions of the songs in like the summary recap video that I saw, which I was like, why did they do that? Did they not sound very good? So yeah, I thought that was strange, but I mean, it looked really cool. I didn't really go out of my way to watch any of the live shows, but I just watched the 4 or 5 minute summary recap. But yeah, you know, I read a lot of people were complaining about the heat and the water. And then when I spoke to some people that actually went there, everyone that I talked to had a good time. And they said, hey, you know what? It was Vegas. It was May. Of course it was going to be hot. And they just said that they prepared and it was fine. And it wasn't that big a deal. It was just a bunch of noise from people online. I said, oh, okay. Cause I think that's why they made it a couple 3 weeks earlier this year, was to try to just curb some of that heat situation. Yeah. But yeah, I've heard the fairgrounds is pretty darn easy to access, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I love an excuse to go to Vegas. We used to play there quite a bit. Quick story there. I don't know if you ever heard this one, but when at one point in the early, let's see, I can't remember if it was like the gift cycle or the welcome cycle, but it must have been the gift cycle. There was a scenario where Limp Bizkit was supposed to play. I shouldn't be bringing this up, but here we go. They were supposed to play in Vegas, but they decided to go play in San Francisco for more money. So the big rock station in Vegas, I think it was called like 107.3 or 5 or something like that. They were so mad about it. They said, okay, they knew about our feud. They said, every time we would normally play a Limp Bizkit song, we're going to play a Taproot song. So we actually got pretty big in Vegas, even though it's a pretty small market, which was cool with us because we were playing there like quarterly and we had, you know, really good big crowds there because of the radio support. So that was always pretty fun.
I'll leave you with these 2 questions. They're kind of completely opposite ends of things. First one I'll ask, since we're talking, actually I don't know which one I want to ask because we're right in the thick of both. So I'll start with the juicier one.
Yeah.
Do you ever, like, and I'm sure there's no ill will on your guys' end, but do you ever think the Limp Bizkit beef will like be hashed and like where you can be cordial with them if you aren't, or there's still like some sort of ill will on one end or the other?
So one of the shows that we're playing this year, we are on the same day as them. It might be Rockville and Daytona, which I think is May 12th. I think I might have it right. So he would love to officially get up and sing a song with him. He's like, oh, I'd love to go sing Stuck with him or something. I don't know if they even play that song anymore. We've heard that there's no ill will on their part. I've seen a bunch of interviews with Fred, and he seems like he's just a, you know, chill, middle-aged dude, like a bunch of us now. And right. So I think that'd be really fun. And I think that we would hope that, you know, maybe we would get to chat with them and say hi and catch up real quick, and it would be fine and be over and done with. And if we were able to do something musically with them, that'd be really cool too. So yeah, I think that would be a fun, cool outcome if we were able to do that. We'll see what happens here in May. So see if we can make that happen.
And then my last question for you was, how did you find Blue Ridge to be?
So we were driving in at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. I think we had to be there we're supposed to be there by 11. And it was a terrible, terrible storm. It was almost blackout, torrential rains, thunder, lightning. The drive up to it, the power was out. And we got the word that they were not letting anyone in the gate. So we actually we said, okay, we're just going to go find a restaurant to sit down in and kill some time. All of the strip that we were on kind of leading up to it, it was all out of power. And the first place we found was a Wendy's that had power. So we went and sat inside of a Wendy's for like an hour, hour and a half. Then we got the word that, they're letting the artists in. So we went to the venue, got there, I think like an hour and a half later. We got there around noon or 12:30. We were supposed to be loaded in on stage by like 1 o'clock. And I think we were supposed to be playing by 4:30. So we got there, we drove in, and they said, just go right to the stage. So we pulled in behind these semi trucks, and there was like this hold up. No one was moving, and the stage was right past the semi trucks. So, and I'm just like in my minivan driving. So I get out and I talk to the driver. I said, who are you guys with? And he says, I've got Shinedown stuff here. I was like, so what are they telling you? He says, they're saying that the stage area is too muddy and we're going to get stuck, so we can't go back there. I said, okay. They're like, yeah, so just wait. We'll see what happens. So we end up backing up from the stage. We're like, we're stuck here. We're not moving anywhere because they're the headliner, so they haven't even gotten their crap on stage yet. They would have to get theirs on, and then all the bands that come before that would have to get on. So we ended up going to our little trailer area, which was really nice trailers, and it was kind of these communal areas, and we were sharing an area with like Death Angel, and I don't really know them very well, but they were all really nice, cool guys.
Super great dudes.
Yeah, they're really cool. So we were chit-chatting with them, and then all of a sudden we started getting texts and calls that they canceled the show. So our manager, Tom, he's like, I'm going to go see if we can get paid, and we're getting the heck out of here. So, so we found out at the same time when everyone else did. It was probably right on, it was 2:30, something like that. And fortunately, they paid us, which was really awesome. And I think maybe everyone got paid. And a couple reasons that we left, because then the whole thing happened with Papa Roach and all that. I thought it was cool, like what they did in Heartsick. I know that they had a show. We had already said on social media we're going to go hang out at a bowling alley, so that if anyone wanted to come hang out with us, we were going to be there, and we'd do some karaoke and have some drinks and bowl. So we had already committed to that before we heard that other bands were going to try and play. So we went bowling, did karaoke, had a blast. Probably, 70, 80, 100 fans showed up, and I played them some of the new record, which wasn't out yet, and some people, and just had some great conversations. And I had a lot of people say like, that was way more fun than seeing you at the show. Like, glad we got to hang out. The next day we left, and the next day the weather wasn't great, but it wasn't horrible. So I'd say if anything, that, is what may have kind of fueled some of the conspiracy theories that they canceled, when they didn't necessarily have to. But I can tell you from our experience, a couple of the guys, Taylor, the guitar player, and our manager, they went and saw Slipknot the night before, and they said it was just top notch the whole way. Everyone at the venue was super nice, and everything was well organized. And from an artist perspective, everything was like on the up and up. I don't know, from everything I read and I saw, the fan experience looked like it was tough, the day before. But, from an artist perspective, they treated us really well. The other guys had a good experience the Friday night before. The weather was horrible on Saturday. And, so that's all I can really comment on. I mean, if they were, and the other thing is we took one way in and one other way out. I mean, it's like a one tiny little 2-lane road, going in and out of there. So to me, it was just like, wow, it just doesn't feel like they have the right infrastructure to have that big of a festival in that area. I mean, you need a lot more options to kind of get in and out. And so I don't know, hopefully they get it figured out, but that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I've heard from a handful of band friends that have played it the last couple of years and all that, and friends that have gone as attendees. I've heard kind of same thing, kind of conflicting, like, it's great or it's awful. And I'm like, somewhere in there's the truth. I just don't know where it is or what the experience really is like. I'm also kind of surprised, and maybe I'm spoiling something, but I'm surprised you haven't been asked to do Upheaval here. Like, it seems like a no-brainer that they'd ask you to play.
I don't think we've been asked to do it yet. There's a couple things that we've committed to that haven't been announced yet, but I don't believe that's one of them.
Okay. They announced Saliva today, so I was like, man, okay, maybe we're getting into the hometown band or home state band roughly of we didn't even get the good Saliva with Josie Scott. We just got Saliva with whoever is singing for him now. So I'm like, who cares? No offense to those guys, but I mean, all these other festivals got Josie Scott, and I'm like, couldn't cut him off like an extra $2K to get Josie Scott with him?
That's a tough situation. Sometimes I even wonder if maybe some of the venues understand that there's the thing going on, because I remember Saliva, the regular one, was booked, and the comments chatter started, and someone said, "This isn't even the real Saliva, is it?" And the venue was saying, "Yes, of course it is." And they're like, "No, this is the real Saliva," and they tagged Josie Scott Saliva. And then I was like, I wonder if that venue didn't even know that this was a thing.
Well, I didn't know he was going around doing a version of it. I mean, wouldn't surprise me, but it's I don't know, it's weird. That's like, I saw an ad coming home from Detroit that Motley Crue was playing Soaring Eagle, and I was like, there's no way that's happening. And because I was like, how do you go from stadiums and arenas? And they're like, by the way, we're playing outdoors at Soaring Eagle. No way.
So what's the story?
I don't know. Ironically, I can't find any information that Motley Crue is playing, whether Soaring Eagle's website or Motley Crue's touring schedule or anything. Granted, they got my money. They got my money twice. Like the first time I saw them, like forever ago, they were awesome. And then Saints of Los Angeles tour, they were really good. And then I saw them on like another tour after that. It was awful. I saw them at the first date of the farewell tour here in Grand Rapids. It was awful. Like all the things that you saw where like Tommy Lee's kick drum and snare broke and a whole bunch of other problems. And it was just like, I'm done. You're not getting my like money anymore.
Oh, that's too bad.
You should.
So the band,
come see you.
It wasn't just Vince. Like the whole band was not good.
Yeah, no, it wasn't good. Which that's something that still baffles me too. How does that band, which clearly seems like they're playing to a ton of backing tracks and have been for a long time, which is whatever. Of all the things you're not going to have on a backing track, why is it, Vince, that you're letting go out there just sounding like that? Like, where it's like, yeah, we're going to invest in all of these pyro and all the backing tracks for, the backing vocals and all these other things. But you know what, Vince? You're on your own. You can sound like shit. That's on you.
It's so baffling. And I've actually, I kind of grew up with Motley Crue. I was a fan, and as I go back and listen to some of those records, particularly Girls, Girls, Girls and Dr. Feelgood, like I think that I see Tommy Lee as a more underrated drummer now than I used to as far as the recordings go. So I was bummed to kind of hear that because I saw the video for that, was it Circus whatever tour, like when I saw the footage of that, I was like, oh, it looked cool. Like, I mean, but it's disappointing to hear that even the band isn't really sounding good anymore.
I mean, they sound great because they're on tracks. That's the thing is I don't know. I'm kind of of two minds of it where I'm like, I don't mind, but then sometimes I'm like, I do mind. I mean, and then that's like, I don't know. It's the day and age we live in now. Like, and I get it. Like, there's a lot of things where it's like, drummers using triggers, but it's like, I understand why that's a thing. Like, you want a consistency in sound. These tools are there to help you, but we kind of become so reliant on them. I feel like now in the touring industry that it's just like a thing where it's like, again, like I said, it used to be loud amps. You would see everything sounded good. And then what's really been interesting too, speaking to Metallica, you were saying earlier about how like, maybe Lars doesn't sound the greatest live or doesn't play his things exactly like he does on record. Someone after our show, because they record all the records or all the shows and then you can buy them on like vinyl or whatever. Someone recently started noticing that the Detroit date, especially when they released some of the audio from that someone took fan film footage of Lars playing and then compared, like A and B'd it to what you hear on the live recording, totally different.
No way.
I'll have to find that and send it to you. But it's like, I forget what song it was. But it's like the kick pattern. It's like everyone's like, oh, it's so tight, it's so crazy. Like, because a big thing that James has been talking about is how Lars practices now and will practice before shows, and really takes it seriously. And so everyone's like, oh man, you can really hear him putting in the time and how it's paying off. And then someone's like, well, here's the footage of this. Didn't sound like that at all. And some people are like, well, it's from a phone and you're far away and other things, and sound can move, obviously. So it's one of those where I'm like, yeah, but even like when you hear like kick patterns and stuff, it's like those kick patterns aren't as clean and precise as they are like on that. So it's like that seems like it was re-overdubbed for that. But I mean, that's another old trick too.
The one that I would like to see would be one, because I came home and I showed my son, who's my only hard rock fan, my oldest one, the middle part of one. And what is really surprising is how much variation there is in the tempo. So he plays the things okay, like he plays the double kick pattern and the darkness imprisoning me and all that stuff. But then when Let Me in Life in Hell, when the fast beat starts up again, and then when he does the snare, like dig-a-dig-a-dig-a-dig-a-dig-a-dig, like that slows way down compared to then going back to it. So it's like like he slows way down for it. Like it's really, really jarring. Like so I'd be curious to know how that AB is, if maybe they've tried to do something there. That would be the most obvious one that I can think of from my memory. That would be pretty obvious to look at.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you find out like some of these things. It's almost like you're like, it's like magic and all that stuff. It's like don't learn anything, because then you're just like, I've said countless times, I wish I never got into booking shows. I wish I never got into understanding any of like production stuff, because all I do now is just ruin the experience for myself, where I'm like, yeah, those are triggered kicks. Well, that's a sample.
Yeah,
that person's not doing that. Hey, where is that low harmony coming from that I clearly don't see anyone near a microphone on? Or hey, that vocalist just totally hit this part and wasn't remotely near a microphone stand. One of my
favorite lyrics of Steve's on one of our songs that didn't make a record is one of the B-sides. This Remain. He starts a song. He says, "When you are the trick of the trade, the magic seems to fade in a way." And that's exactly what he's talking about. Basically, once you're in the band, and you'll never be able to watch a show the same way again, because you're always thinking about the sound or who's doing what, or yeah, it's a trip.
Merch cuts, guarantees, all those fun things. Yeah, just ruin it for you. Ruin it for you. I wish I. But I mean, it's also funny too, because it's why I feel like I over-explain why I know as much as I do, because I also, in some instances, I can't tell people the information that I've been given and why I know certain things, but also just kind of being a student of the thing that I love has always been there. But I don't know. It's kind of weird. Like it's funny, as you were kind of talking about how like sometimes people will tell you like, oh, this record means something, you're my favorite band, or this show is like my favorite, whatever. It's weird. This last, like, because I always talk about how like no one comments on these things. Like I just put it out, it does numbers, and it just exists, and that's fine. But recently, I think because I've been saying that, people have actually been, and the show's been kind of expanding beyond to a new listenership. I'm actually starting to get people who are like, oh, I love this episode, or someone texting me or DMing me or whatever. And it gets kind of weird, because you're like, someone that listens to the show that's a fan of the show, like, sent me a Christmas card and has like the last 2 years and tells me like how the show helps him through whatever. And, that's kind of wild. Like, it's a trip that I'm like, okay, I just sit in this room, not hanging out with my wife, and I do this thing for a few hours or hours a week, and it means something to someone, which is weird to me, because it's like, I'm not anybody. Like, you could do this. But it's weird.
Yeah, my theory was my theory with podcasting has always been that, and I'm sure, I mean, I could ask you questions for hours about this, but that was for another time. But I would assume that, I mean, you've obviously got to get so many episodes in the can and to continue to get better. And then, but here's my question. Do you find that over time, if you get some new listenership, like a lot of those people will go back and listen to a whole bunch of old episodes, and then that kind of helps perpetuate it? Or for the most part, do you see like someone becomes a fan or a listener, and then all of a sudden they just kind of carry on from there?
Yeah, it's kind of both. Like sometimes, like I had someone comment on an episode I posted, like that I put out like probably 4 or 5 years ago. And it's not of a dude from a band that's like super big. Like they were important to me. Like I remember being into them, and it was kind of crazy. Like through social media, I found the dude comment. There's a Instagram page called Return to the Pit, and it's this photographer who's been photographing shows in the New England, Massachusetts area for like 25 years. So like you can see some of the first like Hatebreed shows and stuff like that. Like he's got, like when he was photographing those. So someone, and it'll be like, it was this show at this place at this date. He's kind of chronicling the scene kind of in its infancy and so forth in his local area, and saw one of this band Legia. And so I saw the guitar player commented. I didn't know he had any social media, followed him, started DMing, had him on the show. Really great chat. And then this kid, like the other day, like that was one where it was for me, like where I'm like, I enjoyed that. I don't know if anyone cares. Someone just commented, they're like, oh my God, I just found this episode. I love this band. This band only like put out like 2 records. I didn't even know this was the thing. I just found this. Sorry. I just saw that you're talking about how you're talking to Ken from Unearth Now As Lay Dying about him recording the record you were really talking about. I have that on the queue. And then I see you have Ken on a couple other times, so I'm going to go from there. And then, so like, that's always been kind of my thing. Like, I don't pay for advertisements. Like, everything I have is organic and DIY. Because I know how many shows and podcasts and stuff I find, or bands where I'm like, this song's awesome. Oh my God, this band's got like 4 other records. Can't wait to get into it. And I wanted there to kind of be that same thing where also someone could kind of go through, and, a lot of people in this space will delete their couple of first like handful episodes that don't sound good.
Oh, really?
It doesn't sound good. And I'm like, you can't do that, man. That's just like, it's just like a band putting out their first record. Do you think Korn thinks the first Korn record sounds great? No. They probably look at it and go, oh my God, it sounds awful. And oh my God, I wish I could do a million other things to make it sound better. And maybe they do now when they play it live, they make it sound the way they want it to. But for us fans, that first record, the way it sounds, it's important. And you have to acknowledge and still celebrate where you came from. And to me, I've always looked at the podcast the same way, where I'm like, I think it would be interesting. And I've kind of done this where I'll go back through like episodes that I was like, oh, I remember that being a fun show, and go back and listen to it. And I'll pick some older ones and I'm like, oh God, this was bad. Or this sounded bad, or this, something. And I'm like, it's how I got where I am, good, better, and different. Like you can't cut out where you started and just be like, I'm starting here now and I was always good. And it's like, you can't do that. And I hope that there's a little bit of a charm to that too, for someone to go. I mean, I can't tell you how many times when friends will be like, oh, he's got a great podcast. Like Alfonso always champions the show to people, which gets sort of embarrassing to me. But it's funny because it becomes this thing where I've literally watched people grab their phone and like, well, what's it called? And they'll start looking. They're like, holy shit, you got like 400 episodes. Oh my God, you had so-and-so on? And then they're just like, who are you? And like that at least is the funnier thing to me when someone looks at all of it and looks at kind of who I've had on. They're just like, who are you? What have you, who, how? And I'm like, nobody, dude. Just someone who did this because I wanted to. And here I am.
Yeah, man, that's awesome.
Somehow stumbled into getting to do something really cool that I don't know, the other part of the imposter syndrome thing, like when friends in the industry and people that I've had on are like, you're so good at this and, you really have a skill. And I would just be like, talking's not a skill. It's really taken the last like year or so of me, again, not deflecting compliments, but accepting them and kind of embracing it sort of. But I still don't feel like talking to people is a skill. I'm like, everyone can do it. Anyone can do literally anyone can do this. But
there's
people don't feel.
Well, you know what? I would say maybe talking talking in and of itself is not a skill the way you're defining it, but what is a skill is, I'd say, number one, doing your research and coming up with good questions. But then number two, I'd say just being comfortable enough with your, I guess, intuition and intellectual curiosity to let the conversation go where it seems to naturally want to go. I think that's what you're really good at among the other first two things. But that's you can't be talking to someone for 2.5 hours without being able to have some of that.
Yeah, but I mean, and I'll kind of leave it on this and do all that so we can go spend time with our families and all that. The job I left, up until going back to a job that I had left like 6 or 7 years ago, so I'm back at a screen printing company, which also took a little bit of reconciliation of where was I the most happiest in my work-life balance. And I realized it was at a place I had left because I was unhappy. And then I had to reconcile with myself that it wasn't a failure to go back to a thing that I thought I was below or above or whatever. But looking at it from a healthier perspective of like, well, I was happier in a lot more of my facets. Did it pay me as much? No. Like I was taking a pretty significant pay decrease to go to this job, but I realized that there were other things that were going to be more enriching in my life as a result, and that it was worth it.
Wow. You went back to a previous job because you realized that you were happier there?
I was happier with things that made my life easier for my personal life.
Wow, that's interesting. That doesn't happen very often.
And the other hard part was I had taken a job where I wanted to be. I was like the general manager of a store, like a sports apparel store, selling jerseys and stuff. And I love sports. I love jerseys. I love hats. Like that was perfect for me. And I turned that place around, and I was really proud of the work I was doing and the accolades and the attention I was getting. Like, not to toot my own horn, when we split the district up in half and we got a new district manager, he started doing a team leader, store manager of the week. And for 3 out of the first 4 weeks, I got it. It was also kind of really sad and nice to hear that once I left and the person I picked that was like my right-hand person to take over for me, that the store's kind of gone to shit, not because the person's a bad manager, but just because the two of us were essentially the bulk of the workforce and everyone that was pushing and driving all the results. So when half of that workforce is gone, it was kind of nice to hear. It's like, oh, my leaving was felt, because I am one of those people that is not disillusioned to think that, oh, they're never going to be able to replace me. No, you will. It's a business. It'll go on and succeed without you. I go to some of the jobs I used to work at, and they're still there. A lot of them are not, which is funny, but it's a thing where I'm not so high on myself that I don't understand that the business will continue on. Now, I can at least take solace in the fact that will they be able to find someone who did some of the intangibles as good as me? No. I think that they'll find someone that has to do their own thing and make it their own way, but it's a thing where that job really was tough because I went after it really hard, more aggressively than I ever have. I actually called back the person I interviewed with. That was because he's like, oh, I got a couple more interviews. And I called him. I was like, are you still at the store? And he goes, yeah. And I go, I'm coming back in. And I told him, I was like, I've been talking about and telling myself I need to be more mindful of what I say and be more like speak with intent and purpose. I realize that it makes me feel awkward to tell you that, like, I know I'm going to do really good at this job. You're not going to find anyone better than me, and I'll prove it to you. You just have to hire me. And I go, because I'm not braggy by nature. That's not me. And I go, but I really want this. So I feel like you need to hear that, how much I want it. Because if I tell you now how much I want it, and then when I show you that I'm going to do those things, you're going to look real awesome when I take over this store. Your store's going to look great. Your sales are going to be great. You're going to have a great team. I go, I already have a thing in mind. I walked in and I was like, here's what I need to change. These things need to go because I think it's going to be for the betterment of this company and this store. And I turned it all around in like a month and did it.
Hell yeah, dude. So what was the reaction when you said all that stuff to him? Was he like, oh yeah? Okay, yeah, let's do this. I mean, like right away, were you convinced? Did you convince him?
It wasn't a right away thing, but it was like maybe an hour later. He gave me a call. He's like, job's yours if you want it. And that was what he told me that it was. And he goes, I was going to do an interview with somebody else. It was going to be their like second or third interview as well. I was going to have them meet some of the staff and check out the store. He goes, but the fact that you came back and then said all that, I was like you said, you showed, and like not only showing what you will show, but like you showed the initiative that you wanted it. And I could hear that you wanted it and what it meant to you to take over a store and to be the it person again, and the challenges you wanted to throw out there for yourself. He goes, a lot of people, and this is why I think sometimes like these things are sort of wasted on youth, because it's like, I at least have the tenure of I've done all these things. So
right.
When I say I can do, like when I tell you I can take over your store and I understand the metrics thing, I can tell you that I took over a store in a very similar situation. Granted, it was in food, not in retail, although food is technically retail. But my first 3 days there, we had an inventory. We ran a 16.2% profit margin, which was good for that. That was pretty average for that store. My first full month by myself taking over, we ran a 48.6% profit margin in the one full month that I took over.
Wow, I can't even think of how you could impact margin that quickly, that significantly, but
because I got rid of SKUs that weren't selling, so we weren't spending extra money having inventory that no one wanted and was just sitting in a shelf, and then I'm throwing it away, I'm discounting it, having to mark it down below what we're actually paying for it. I realized that, and I also paid attention to what the customers were telling me. My customers at that store, that grocery store I worked at in our deli department, they knew that every week we'd have this on sale, the next week it'd be this, and then the next week it'd be back to this. So they would load up on the one thing they wanted, would wait the other week out, and come back. So instead of having, 30, 40 different SKUs of different lunch meats and products that no one wanted, I just honed in on what we did sell very well, and I just honed in on that and just really focused on that. And I knew that I could do that because I did it at Sam's Club, where their thing was in my deli department. You have a section of, here's your planogram, here's your layout, here's what you got to do, here's, stock and inventory coming for holidays, upcoming sales, whatever. And their whole thing was, if you know your business, set it up to be successful, drive sales, drive results. And so,
well, that's cool that they give you that amount of flexibility there. I wouldn't have expected that.
They didn't. I happened to have a boss that really believed in letting his team be successful. And it was a thing where I remember our district management team came in and they put me through the paces for a minute, and they were like, why do you have 12 facings of this one item? And I go, because we sell it. And they're like, how many facings are you supposed to have per the planogram? I go, 2. And they go, okay, so why don't, and then how many facings of this thing you're supposed to have? I go, you're supposed to have 4. And they go, how many do you have? I go, 2. Literally I had 2 containers of the thing, not the 4 facings, 5 by 2 wide of each. And they go, and again, their whole motto is know your numbers, know your business. So they scan it.
So a facing might be I'm picturing it might be hamburger meat or packages of ham or something, and you're only supposed to have
great example,
2 columns of it, but you've got 10 columns of it.
Sure. And so I remember at one point they were like, okay, well, let's see how well let's see if you know your stuff. They scanned the item that I shrunk down significantly, and they go, what is the club average, the company average for this item? And I go, or sales. And I go, club average is, I think it was 12. And they go, what do you do? And I go, 4. And I go, so I've allotted exactly what we sell in a week. And they go, and then they scan the item that I maxed out. And they're like, what's the club average of this? And I go, 3. And they go, what do you sell? I go, 128. I was off of my 128. I think it was actually 132. But
dude, that's
I was
awesome.
I was able to do that the entire my entire department. I also was able to realize when something wasn't we'd get a new product and they'd be like, "Oh, this is $14.99." You'd get people looking at. I'd literally hear people when I'm stocking out shelves. "Oh, that looks really good." "Oh, not at that price though." So then I'd go in, look at our profit, our margins. Typically, we wanted to be around 32 to 40, 38, 42, somewhere in there.
Yep.
I realized we were sitting on the higher end at about 44 with that item. So I took it down, and I just 1 week I was like, okay, let's drop it down $1. Let's see what it does. Moved a little bit, dropped it down a little bit more. I found the sweet spot for it. It took me about about 2-3 weeks. I found the sweet spot for it though. Then we started selling a ton of it, and then everyone was like, well, who gave you permission? And like, thankfully I had a boss that just would back me up with whatever I did because he knew I knew what I was doing. And I remember just like, I would do that. I would just find something and I'm like, okay, I hear people want this, but the price margin is where they're not comfortable. We're kind of next to a low income apartment complexes all around us. We have a Walmart next to us, so like that also doesn't help. And we got a Meijer right next to us. So I got to be comparative to the prices of some of the things that they're buying there. Keep that in mind. And then it was interesting once you kind of start figuring that out, your department looks awesome because you're just able to keep selling stuff. And it's like, you can't just be so married to one way of doing something.
That's cool. That's a great story.
But that's like, I'm good at that. Like stats, like money, math and stuff like that. Really good at it. And I know I'm really good at it. Give me a budget. Tell me, like, that was another fun story at Sam's Club is like, I remember they found out I was really good at doing schedules and not messing with like productivity or anything. And they handed me the log and they're like, all right, over the next week, we need like 150 hours cut. And then I go, I need to know what everyone makes. And they're like, no, you don't. I was like, I can't make a schedule accordingly if I don't know what people make. I go, you guys do things where it's like someone can work a Sunday and they're making triple time because they've been here for 35 years. I need to know that because why would I pay someone $35 an hour when I can get 2 part-time employees who are looking for hours and not getting maxed out anyway, and I don't have to give them I'm not even coming to half of that an hour. And then so from there, like they gave me the okay to like get hourly wages, and then I trimmed the hours, and like the next week they were like, hey, so over the next like 3 weeks we need like 700 hours trimmed. I love that shit. Like that shit's so much fun to me. But yeah, I mean, I also hate it because like,
yeah, I was gonna say in a completely sorry to cut you off in a completely different realm. Like that's kind of like what's kept me going in my job, because we're always looking for efficiencies and all that. And it's a completely different world, but it's all the same stuff. It's just like, how do you motivate people? How do you do things smarter? And yeah, and start goals, and it's all fun, man. It's fun to figure that stuff out.
Yeah, it's a human puzzle. It's a lot of fun. Until everyone finds out that you're the reason that they're now not making as much money on their paychecks for doing nothing.
Well, there's that.
Sorry.
Well, on the other hand, I mean, kind of like what I went back to say about you just kind of be like, working hard and adding value. Like I'm always convinced that, if somebody does that, just like, your pitch going into that job. I mean, if you come in with that mindset and you're focused and you ask the right questions and do the right things, I mean, and you learn how to do something well, like, man, we're always going to need people that do that stuff. I mean, I guess that's kind of what I go back to my kids. I'm trying to just like, I just want people to say like, oh, what do you want for your kids? Like, yeah, I want them to be happy, but I also want them to be just productive human beings. Like I want them to, like if they're happy, but that means that they're sitting in my basement, for their 20s, like that's not going to make me happy.
Yeah.
Like my girls both got jobs last summer, and I was like, all right, they're 14 and 15 years old. Like, all right, you girls go. Hey, boys, what do you get? These girls are showing you up. I mean, I was talking about my girls' line earlier, but like, I was proud of them for both getting out there and working.
They lied on their applications, clearly.
Yeah. There you go. Maybe that's the secret. Yeah, no, I get it. Funny.
So where can everyone find you, or anything you would like to plug online?
I appreciate it. So yeah, you can just follow me. It's at Jarrod Montague on Facebook and Instagram. That's pretty much what I stick to now. And then True Rockstars is also a couple other accounts on Facebook and Instagram that I keep up. Usually I've got the book that if you wanted to check that out, you could Google True Rockstars book, and you could find a link where you could still buy a hard copy of that. And someday maybe I'll get around to doing an audio version that I might want your help with, but we'll see what happens once I can make some time for that. And otherwise, I got a handful of hard copies left. And what else? Yeah, you can follow Taproot at Facebook. That's mostly where we're still doing things, and a little bit of Instagram. We've got like I said, I think we've got 8 or 9 shows that have been announced, but we're excited to do some more gigs, and it's been fun. And you can go check out the new record. It's called Scissors, Taproot, on all your major streaming platforms, and it's really good. I'd say it is probably in the, I don't know, it's somewhere among my favorite Taproot records. It's not the top, it's not the bottom, but hey, there it is. Awesome, man. True rock
I was like,
star.
I know it's in here somewhere. Just had to reorganize my desk a couple of times, like after consolidating a bunch of media. So I was like, where did I put my books?
That's cool. Yeah, you had that pretty close. That's not bad. So yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you, John. I'm always a big fan of what you do, and I need to go back and kind of get refreshed on some of your more recent podcasts. I haven't listened here more recently, but I was in a good groove of watching a lot of them for a while, so I have to go back. But thanks for having me back.
I know it gets a little complicated, as my wife even said. She was like, I tried listening to the new thing that I put out with some of my close friends. And she was like, I just keep coming back. My wife saying, like, just keep coming back to, like, I can hear you talk anytime I want. And these two people too, because they come into my house. So, like, I don't need to listen to it in my spare time. And I'm like, that's fair. I get it. That's no, because a lot of people go to Bridget and they're like, oh, you must, like, love his show. She goes, no, I live with him.
Yeah, of course. But, like, my wife hardly comes to any of my shows for any of my bands. And people are like, oh, where's Stephanie at? I'm like, so for one thing, she was with me the whole time we were doing it, full on tour back in the day. So she's been there, done that. And yeah, secondly, she's like, nah, I'm good. That's his thing. I got my thing at home. I'm good. So what is it? Absence makes heart grow fonder, right?
100%. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Enjoy the rest of your night, and hopefully see you back around these parts sometime in the new year, hopefully, or this year, new year. Jesus, shows you how much I'm paying attention to calendars. So hopefully in this calendar year, we'll see you back around these parts. Hopefully,
I know we're going to be in Lansing. So let's see where that is. Let's see. Lansing is on May 18th. So, but yeah, we'll see if we can get a GR one on the calendar.
Absolutely. Enjoy the rest of your night.
All right, you too. Thanks, John. We'll see you.
So that was my conversation with Jarrod. I want to thank. Actually, I want to thank you if you're still listening to this after the 2+ hours, 2.5 hours. And you're still listening to the outro. Thank you for checking this out. Hopefully you got something out of it. I know for myself, when I was done with the chat, I felt really good about it. I felt really, motivated to want to do better, to that I'm on the right path of some of the things that I think. And, the other thing too, and kind of a common sentiment, myself and the two other guys that do the bar podcast, have been getting in real time this past week since the last episode dropped, was just a lot of people saying that, they love the honesty and the asking the questions. And especially on the bar podcast, where it becomes more of like, three dudes in this situation having a real honest conversation about things. And sometimes that's what I love about that show, but I love when it happens over here too. And I think that this show has really given me the permission to open up myself and ask questions and have conversations with people without kind of the fear of, I don't necessarily want to say looking stupid, but without being afraid to ask questions. Questions that you want to know, questions on how to learn and grow yourself. And that's sort of the thing too with, Jarrod writing his book, True Rock Stars, that I think it's the other reason I enjoy talking to him about some of these things, because I can kind of bounce some of these things that maybe I don't have an avenue to do such, but that he's able to kind of just go with it. But then also, I think, which showcases why I think he is probably a really good leader. I don't know, but sometimes you can just kind of tell like why someone is probably in a leadership role. And listening to Jarrod, who listened to what I would say, be kind of taken by it and go, oh, that's a good thought, or that's a good idea, and then wouldn't be afraid to ask me a follow-up question about something he's intrigued by based on something I'm saying. And to me, I think that's why I enjoy talking to people, because you never know who can teach you what, or where a learning moment can come from. And I think if you just kind of always have this mentality that you know everything and can't be taught, or nothing can be better than this, or I'll even take it a step further and just say that you might perceive somebody to be lesser than you in some capacity, but those might be the ones that have the most profound message to deliver to you. I don't know. It's something I walked away from the conversation, and that was something I just kept thinking about later that evening and then into the next day when I was listening back to some of this conversation. But at the end of the day, I really hope you enjoyed the conversation that we just had. I'm going to kind of wrap up this episode a little bit quicker just because, this episode was a little bit longer. If you would like to keep up with Taproot, you can find them simple enough at taprootmerch.com. Should be the landing page for everything. Otherwise, if you want to find them on Facebook, it's Taproot Music. Instagram and Twitter are follow Taproot. And if you'd like to keep up with Jarrod, you can find him on Instagram at Jarrod Montague. Go pick up his book. I have a copy. If you watch the YouTube version and you saw me looking like I didn't give a fuck about what Jarrod was saying, it's because I was actually looking for his book to show that I have the book still. I have read it the one time I got it, and then when I didn't even have the hardcover version, the book itself, I had a PDF, I believe. But I went back and reread it once I got the book. It's very enjoyable. I think it's just enough of kind of like the rock star stuff of tour stories, how the band came to be, sort of a memoir of sorts about Jarrod, while also kind of traversing and kind of being like a self-help kind of a book as well. So I think there's definitely something in there for somebody. If you're listening to this episode and you enjoyed any of this conversation or even the past one, go pick up his book. I think you'll thoroughly enjoy it. I think there's something to be learned and gained from reading his book, so definitely do that. If you would like to keep up with the podcast, you can find us simple enough at BrewSpeakPod on all your major social media platforms. And if you would like to email me, you can do such at brewtallyspeaking@gmail.com. Send me guest suggestions, keep up with comments, whatever. I have really, 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 really been enjoying everyone actually doing that lately. For so long I have been saying that like I just do these and they go out into the void and I have no idea how anyone feels. A bunch of you are actually starting to reach out, DM me, whatever, talking about these episodes, leaving comments on the YouTube versions and so forth, and it just is greatly appreciated. Anytime anyone obviously takes the time to listen to this, wants to engage in different things regarding the episode. So very much appreciative of all that. Keep that coming. And lastly, I want to thank Rockabilia for their continued support of the podcast. Everyone over there, great people, been great working with them over the years. And I know our code is not working currently. We are working on getting a new one up. So unfortunately, can't use my code right now. But still go over to rockabilia.com. They have the Valentine's Day stuff going up. There's so many things going on with them over there. Go check out everything. They have all kinds of merch from not just metal and rock, but like hip hop and all kinds of stuff. I promise if you spend the time on that website, there will at least be a thing you want. So head on over there and support them for supporting us. And till next time, I am John, and I will see you back here next week with Mike from Darkest Hour. It's a quick one, but it's a good one. I'll talk to you then.